Chapter 1169. Yuan Xian's experience tells us one thing: don't act pretentiously, or you'll be struck by lightning. Don't raise flags for no reason. Yuan Xian had raised a huge flag, so he couldn't blame others for not giving him face. As they approached the exit of the South Road, the strategist became more and more nervous, not daring to be negligent. On the contrary, Yuan Xian was happily humming a tune. Seeing the strategist's serious expression, he couldn't help but advise, "Strategist, why are you so nervous? We intercepted the rations as fast as lightning and as fast as thunder. I'm sure the Lu thieves are still in the dark and don't know that the rear supply line has fallen. How will they stop us and set up an ambush?" Yuan Xian hated scholars who dilly-dally and hesitantly. Each and every one of them had groundless worries, and it was annoying. The strategist in front of him was inexperienced and couldn't control Yuan Xian at all, let alone make him listen obediently. Hearing Yuan Xian's words, the strategist couldn't say anything else. Isn't it a pleasure to have friends coming from afar? After marching for an hour and seeing that they were about to leave the south road of Hu County's Xing City, a loud voice resounded in the sky like thunder on a sunny day. The words, "Isn't it a pleasure to have friends coming from afar," echoed in the mountains. Yuan Xian was shocked and hurriedly grabbed the reins. "Why don't you rest for a while and let us do our duty as hosts?" Just as the layers of echoes faded away, another sentence was uttered. "There's an ambush." Yuan Xian couldn't care less about being slapped in the face. He quickly drew his sword and prepared to face the enemy. Just as he finished speaking, the enemy emerged like mushrooms after the rain. The road ahead was blocked, and there were traces of the enemy behind them. Seeing so many enemies appear without a sound, everyone turned pale with fright. The originally orderly formation was now in chaos. Yuan Xian was even more furious. The enemy hadn't even attacked and they were already in chaos. What a stupid teammate. The strategist said, "The enemy outnumbers us. General, please make a decision quickly." This strategist was just an advisor and had no military power in the army. Thus, he had to ask for Yuan Xian's permission before he could command the army. Yuan Xian gritted his teeth and said, "Are we really going to burn the 50,000 don of rations?" The strategist said, "If we don't burn it, the enemy will definitely take it back. It's not worth it." The enemy had completely surrounded them. If they did not burn the food, these supply wagons would become a burden to their escape. If they encountered someone with combat experience, it would be difficult for them to break out of the encirclement. Instead, they would be worn down by the other party until they died without a complete corpse. It was better to be ruthless and not let the enemy get what he couldn't get. They suffered losses when they burned through their rations, but the enemy's losses were even greater. It wasn't that Yuan Xian didn't know this, but his heart ached. Just as they were about to transport the 50,000 don of grain out of Xingcheng South Road, they didn't expect that the enemy wouldn't chase after them. Instead, they sent soldiers to block their way. Time was of the essence, and Yuan Xian didn't have much time to think. "Burn it. Gather the troops and break out." Although Yuan Xian was petty and liked to snitch on Nie Sun, he was still reliable when it came to major issues. At this moment, Qiguan Rang pinched his feather fan and shook it. Seeing that the enemy had made a move, he moved his wrist, and the feather fan moved down along with his movement. "Kill!" The horn of attack sounded, resounding through the mountains and fields. The loud and clear echo entered everyone's eardrums. Military advisor, they've set fire to the rations. Before the two armies met, their sharp eyes saw the fire and smoke rising from the supply team. Qiguan Rang sneered and said, "It doesn't matter if the rations are burned. It tastes just right with human flesh." Li Yun couldn't help but feel a chill down his spine. Just the thought of it made his throat ache. Qiguan Rang's eyes were cold, and he said coldly, "The rations can't be saved. If we can save a portion, then we'll be lucky. If not, then it's not a pity. They were the ones who started the fire, so let them bear the consequences themselves. Pass down the order, only surround and not attack. Although Qiguan Rang and his men looked relaxed as they surrounded the area, in reality, they had only been lying in ambush for 4 hours. 4 hours ago, they were still taking shortcuts elsewhere. If they had been a little later, they could only watch as the enemy escaped with the rations. Although the army didn't show any signs of fatigue, they had used up a lot of energy, so it wasn't wise to attack forcefully. Since Yuan Xian and his men were so heartless as to set fire to the rations, then let them have a taste of their own medicine. Unable to break through, they could only be accompanied by the flames. By doing so, not only could they vent their anger, but they could also cover up the army's lack of combat power. What he said just now seemed to be an act to scare the enemy, but in reality, it was Qiguan Rang's psychological attack, using it to create the illusion that they had sufficient combat power. The strategy of only surrounding and not attacking was also to confuse the enemy and exhaust their patience and rationality. Li Yun said, "I will obey your order." Qiguan Rang brought over a small folding stool and sat down to watch the show, fanning himself. The weather was hot. Even though he had changed into a summer robe, he was still sweating profusely. Looking at the continuous fire, he was even angrier. He was leisurely and carefree, but Yuan Xian and the others were suffering. The enemy could always predict the direction they would break through. That was fine, but the enemy was a coward, refusing to fight. The strategist said, "General, don't be anxious. First stabilize the battle formation and gather the troops to break through. Don't be disorderly." The more disorderly they were, the more advantage the enemy had. The fire in the supply wagons was already considerable. Based on the fire, the enemy would not be able to save much rations even if they wanted to. If these 50,000 dawn of rations were burned to ashes, their goal of intercepting the enemy's supply line would be achieved. Now, they only needed to gather the troops in one place and break through. Yuan Xian also knew this, but the strategist's nagging was more annoying than 10,000 flies. "I know about this. You don't have to waste your breath." The strategist's face turned green. He could only hold on to the reins to ensure that he did not lose his composure. He finally understood Nie Sun's pain. He really wanted to jump up and smash this person's head open. Defense was Qiguan Rang's forte. The troops under his tent were also well-trained soldiers. He dared not say that all of them could follow orders strictly, but they would not make mistakes in basic commands. The power of one person was not enough to be feared, but hundreds and thousands of people could form an impenetrable human wall. They could not break through in front, but there was no way back. This was the predicament Yuan Xian was in. What was more frightening was that the fire in the supply wagons at the back was getting bigger. The enemy was further shrinking the line of defense, squeezing their space. The number of soldiers killed by the enemy was not as many as those burned to death. At this moment, Yuan Xian's face was ashen. He knew the enemy's plan. How sinister! Battle cries shook the heavens and corpses littered the field. Yuan Xian and his men's eyes were red from killing. After fighting for 2 hours, they finally successfully broke through the encirclement with the remaining soldiers from Xingcheng South Road. In this battle, Yuan Xian lost 50% of his troops. Out of the 50%, 70% were burned to death. It was not easy to break through. Yuan Xian and his men naturally did not dare to stay. They led the defeated soldiers and escaped as fast as the wind. Li Yun led his troops and pretended to kill for a while, until the enemy's silhouette disappeared without a trace. Qiguan Rang held a feather fan in his right hand and a folded folding stool in his left. He looked in the direction where the enemy left. Chapter 1170. Li Yun said, "Then, there's finally an explanation." However, he looked at the battlefield with some pity. That was 50,000 dawn of military provisions, but now it was burnt to the ground. Fortunately, the military counselor had calculated the enemy's marching route, so they were able to stop the troop that intercepted the provisions in time. Now that they made the enemy bleed, it could be considered as atoning for their crime. Otherwise, he would be too ashamed to face his lord. Qiguanrang frowned deeply. He did not agree with Li Yun's optimism. If it wasn't for the Lord's use of the method of storing the provisions separately, building multiple granaries and grain lines, I'm afraid the loss today would be even greater. To save manpower and time, many feudal lords like to build a unified granary to store the military provisions in order to facilitate management. If Jiang Pengji chose to do the same, the troop that Huang Song sent to intercept the provisions would earn a lot. The provisions they intercepted and burned would not only be 50,000 dawn of grain, it could be 200,000 dawn or 300,000 dawn or even more. That was a month's worth of military provisions for 100,000 troops. What would the soldiers eat if they burned it all at once? How would they fight without provisions? A fall into the pit, a gain in your wit. Qiguanrang said coldly, if we fall into the same pit twice, what use would the Lord have for us? Upon hearing his words, Li Yun's expression, which had relaxed with much difficulty, became serious again. Yes, Qiguanrang was right. So what if they killed half of the enemy's troops? Those 50,000 dawn of grain were also burned clean by the enemy. What was there to be proud of? You're right, military counselor. Li Yun had a good temper. If it was another arrogant general who was lectured by Qiguanrang, even if he did not show it on his face, he would be dissatisfied. In terms of status and authority in the army, the two were of the same level. What right did Qiguanrang have to lecture him? If Qiguanrang did not understand Li Yun's character, he would not have said such things and made himself a political enemy for no reason. Qiguanrang and the rest returned to the camp. Just as they arrived, a soldier came forward to report that they had caught a suspicious person outside the camp who was spying on the camp. Because the identity reported by the person was suspicious, they did not dare to handle it on their own. They could only report to Qiguanrang. Qiguanrang raised his eyelids and asked coldly, "Suspicious person? Who? What was the identity of this person? How could the soldiers not know how to deal with him?" The soldier said, "The person who came claimed to be the Lord's younger brother, and he had many private seals on him that could prove his identity. I didn't dare to deal with him without permission." The Lord's concubine brother? Qiguanrang's mind raced. He was stunned for a while before he remembered who this person was. Wasn't that Lu Zhao? Although he was the Lord's younger brother, Lu Zhao was very tactful. He usually acted like a hedonistic son of a rich family and was not a threat at all. Qiguanrang had been wary of Lu Zhao at first. He had even wondered if he should do something so that Lu Zhao would die prematurely in his prime so that he would not cause trouble for his lord. However, the Lord did not allow it, and Lu Zhao had been very obedient all these years. Qiguanrang could only suppress his restless heart. "Bring him here," Qiguanrang said. "Whether it's San Lang or not, we'll know at a glance." When he saw Lu Zhao in a slightly sorry state, he was instantly speechless. He thought that someone was pretending to be Lu Zhao, but he didn't expect it to be him. "San Lang Jun, why didn't you stay in Chongzhou? Why did you come to the front lines?" Qiguanrang signaled for the soldiers to loosen the bindings. Lu Zhao had a harmless, naive, and sweet aura. Now that he was tied up and carried over like a chicken, he looked even more pitiful. "Quickly, untie him." Lu Zhao rubbed his hands that were slightly numb from being tied up. With a bitter expression, he said, "Sir Qiguan, you're really strict with your troops. I almost lost my life. If it wasn't for the intelligence of the little boy beside me, who hurriedly revealed his identity, I'm afraid that I would have gone to the King of Hell to complain about my grievances." Qiguanrang's expression did not change, but in his heart, he could not help but raise the butcher's knife. Without waiting for Qiguan Rang to react, Lu Xiao smiled and said, "Sir, what I said just now was all nonsense. Please don't take it to heart. Spying on the camp is a serious crime. If I'm not careful and get shot into a hornet's nest, it's my own fault. You can't blame me, sir." Qiguan Rang furrowed his brows and used his eyes to ask Lu Xiao for the reason he came to the front lines. Lu Xiao saw that Qiguan Rang's expression was even colder and couldn't help but shiver. He begged, "Sir, can you send some troops to Zhao?" "What does San Lang need troops for?" Lu Xiao said, "Of course it's to escort Zhao to see my sister. I have something important to tell her." Although the security in the north was good and it was peaceful, the closer they got to the war zone, the more chaotic it became. Lu Xiao was used to having exquisite clothing, food, shelter, and transportation. When he went out, he was obviously a child of wealth. Robbing him was the right thing to do. Therefore, he mustered up the courage to borrow troops from Qiguan Rang to escort him to see Jiangpengji. The front lines are dangerous and chaotic. San Lang shouldn't put himself in danger. Qiguan Rang advised, "If San Lang has anything to say to the Lord, you can write a letter and send a horse to deliver it to the Lord. You'll get a reply in at most 3 days." This was already a compromise, but Lu Xiao refused to eat it. He shook his head and refused, still insisting on his own opinion. Qiguan Rang was speechless. What an infuriating spoilt brat. Lu Xiao said, "It's not that I don't trust you, but this is a special matter. I have to tell my sister personally. Please tell me everything first." Qiguan Rang saw that Lu Xiao's expression was sincere and he even restrained his usual frivolous behavior. He faintly realized that the situation was serious. "If that's the case, then I'll send 100 guards to escort San Lang to see the Lord." Lu Xiao's eyes shone brightly. He said happily, "Thank you, sir, for fulfilling my wish. God knew how a pampered and spoiled son like him ran all the way here. He must have suffered a lot along the way." When Qiguan Rang sent Lu Xiao over, Jiangpengji was correcting military affairs. "Why is he here?" Lu Xiao howled as he ran into the tent from outside. He said without a care for his image, "Sister, save me." Jiangpengji asked, "There's a ghost chasing after you. You're crying and howling in broad daylight." Lu Xiao secretly wiped his tears. She was really his biological sister. "Do you know there's a war now? If you're captured by the enemy scouts, you won't be able to keep your life." Jiangpengji sternly reprimanded Lu Xiao. If Lu Xiao was taken as a hostage, she wouldn't be merciful. "Get up. It's not proper to act like this." Lu Xiao pouted. "Oh. Tell me. Why do you need me to save you? Can't you write a letter? Why do you have to come personally?" Jiangpengji asked. Lu Xiao looked around and said, "Sister, can you dismiss the servants? So mysterious?" Jiangpengji didn't think that Lu Xiao had anything important to do. However, she still asked the soldiers in the tent to leave and turned off the live stream. "Tell me. There's only the two of us in the tent now. There's no third person." Lu Xiao sat next to Jiangpengji and squirmed. His expression was so weird that he looked like he had constipation for more than a month. "Sister, father." Lu Xiao pulled his sleeves and hung his head. "He wants me to get married." Jiangpengji was speechless. Chapter 1171. You don't like it? Is it because the woman's family background is too low? Jiangpengji frowned. Although Lu Xiao was the son of a concubine, marrying the daughter of a hunter, even if she had saved his life, was too unseemly. Lu Xiao's expression froze as if he wanted to say something. But when he saw Jiangpengji's face, he swallowed his words. "Do you think I'm someone who cares about my family background? Father liked that girl, and in order to make father smile, little brother married her, but... Lu Xiao said, but little brother has some reasons that others can't know, so I can't marry that girl. I definitely can't. Jiang Pengji glanced at Lu Xiao. Not enough for outsiders to understand? Lu Xiao avoided her gaze and awkwardly changed the topic. A few days ago, I went to visit Master Liaochen in Hejian County. I heard that Master Liaochen is a good friend of Min's mother. Jiang Pengji looked down and asked, and then? Lu Xiao laughed dryly. According to Great Master Liaochen, when Min's official mother was pregnant for the third time, she was disturbed by evil spirits due to the lack of yang energy in her body. She had no choice but to hide with Great Master Liaochen to find a way to get rid of the evil spirits. Sigh, it's a pity that the monastery is austere and not good for nurturing the fetus. After listening, Jiang Pengji further confirmed that there was a hidden meaning in Lu Xiao's words. He was probably really looking for him to ask for help. Mother's third pregnancy? Why don't I know about this? She pretended not to know. Aren't there only 2 times? Lu Xiao gulped nervously. Sister, don't scare little brother. If Jiang Pengji really didn't know about this, Lu Xiao wouldn't be seeking protection today. He would be courting death. Jiang Pengji did not tease him and continued to ask. What else do you have to say? Lu Xiao's eyes darted around and only spoke after a while. His words were also intermittent. This little brother has learned a lot of Zen philosophy from Master Liaochen. When she heard him talk about evil spirits, she asked him if there were really evil spirits in the world. What the great master said was true. Evil and humans existed side by side in the world. If the human body lacked yang energy, it was easy to be targeted by evil. As he spoke, Grandmaster began to talk about some interesting things. There's a story that left a deep impression on me. Jiang Pengji sneered at Lu Xiao. To be fair, Lu Xiao was truly pitiful. If not for his family background, he might have had some achievements. What story? A story passed down from the 16 Kingdoms period. Lu Xiao struggled internally for a while before he said hesitantly, it said that the soul of a certain noble goddess left her body and roamed the king of hell's palace at night. She was captured by the black and white impermanence, and the judge said that she couldn't return to the mortal world before her time was up. She refused to accept it and asked the judge why she was wrongly judged. The judge said that her body had already been taken over by a nameless wild ghost, but that wild ghost did not have the memories of a real noblewoman. Because the memories were attached to the soul, although there were remnants of the memories in the physical body, these memories only recognized the noble lady's soul. Unfortunately, in order to assume the identity of the noblewoman, the wandering ghost lied to the noblewoman's relatives that she had lost her memory and took the opportunity to take over her place. Lu Xiao's fingers were trembling as he told the story. He was afraid that Jiang Pengji would beat him up in the next second and kill him to silence him. Jiang Pengji did not make a move. Ah Xiao, are you saying I'm a nameless ghost? Lu Xiao's face was pale as he shook his head. Even if he was given 10 guts, he wouldn't dare to openly provoke them. Although he didn't know who this sister of his was, Master Liaochen also said that he couldn't afford to offend her. Lu Xiao didn't have any interactions with the original Lu Shi. They weren't close siblings, but the person in front of him had taken care of him. Moreover, sigh. Lu Xiao thought about the truth he discovered not long ago. He felt a chill on his neck and couldn't sleep well at night. He was afraid that when he woke up the next day, his brain would move. He thought that his hidden identity could provide him with protection, but he didn't expect that he was also an abandoned chess piece on the surface. As an abandoned chess piece, there was no guarantee of his life. When the chess player felt that he had lost his value, he would only end up being abandoned. He cherished his life, and he wanted to live. After thinking about it, he still took Master Liaochen's suggestion and came all the way to Jiang Pengji. Forget it, I'm not an unreasonable person. No matter what you know, if you want to live for a long time, it's better to continue pretending to be deaf and dumb. Even if you really become a pig, I'll allow you to live the rest of your life in luxury. Lu Xiao couldn't help but shiver. Concubine Dai was right. When the gods fought, a small shrimp like him didn't even have the qualifications to be cannon fodder. Lu Xiao laughed dryly. Sister, I naturally believe in your words. I'll have to ask you to take care of my father. Jiang Pengji rolled her eyes at him. She rolled her eyes angrily. If you're so afraid of my father, why did you dare to escape? Lu Xiao said, I had to choose the lesser of two evils. Didn't I have you to protect me? Jiang Pengji said, stay in the camp and don't run around. The battle at the front line is serious. Don't add to the chaos. Lu Xiao secretly heaved a sigh of relief. He secretly glanced at Jiang Pengji's eyes. He wasn't sure if Jiang Pengji had received his hint. If she had, why was she so calm and unperturbed? Judging from her reaction, she seemed to have known the inside story for a long time. If she really knew, why could she pretend that nothing had happened? What are you thinking about? Jiang Pengji asked out of the blue. Lu Xiao blurted out. Of course I'm thinking about you. I'm thinking about why you're not afraid, Jiang Pengji said. Superfluous feelings will blind people's eyes and cause them to be blind, so they can't see more concrete things. Lu Xiao asked in return, so you don't have superfluous feelings? I don't have that, so I see far more things than you do. People will be afraid of the unknown, but things that they know won't. With that, Lu Xiao was even more certain of his guess. It's getting late. You should go and rest first. I still have to deal with government affairs. Otherwise, I'll stay up until late at night again. Lu Xiao left tactfully. He left. Jiang Pengji didn't deal with government affairs according to his instructions. Instead, she stared at the god slayer on the sword rack in a daze. Suddenly, she asked in her heart. System, Lu Shi didn't die, right? According to Wei Si's revelation, Jiang Pengji didn't obtain the memories of the body's original owner. Because of the language barrier, she wandered outside. Just like the nameless wild ghost in the story, she couldn't obtain the body's memories because her soul didn't match. She could only pretend to have amnesia to deceive the body's relatives. Jiang Pengji was different. She had Lu Shi's memories. As long as she searched carefully, she could even find a lot of content that Lu Shi himself had forgotten. Before Lu Xiao told her the story, she could think that the system had helped. However, Lu Xiao came all the way here to tell her this. The wait was different. Lu Shi was very likely not dead. Thinking back carefully, Lu Shi's death was quite interesting. She was just frightened by the bandits. She stepped forward bravely to block a knife for Wei Jingxian. The knife cut her collar, but it didn't hurt her flesh. After that, Lu Shi had a high fever. After that, Jiang Pengji was pulled over by the system. Jiang Pengji's brain and spirit were strong. She could accurately sense if there was a strange second presence in a body. The conclusion was that Lu Shi's spirit had died. The death of his spirit meant complete death. Now. Chapter 1172. He didn't know if it was his imagination, but Cheng Yuan felt that his lord had been very listless for the past 2 days. He was not the only one who felt this way. The viewers in the live broadcast room also realized that their energetic and disrespectful streamer had entered a strange, sleepy period. At first, they could still laugh and tease Jiang Pengji, but they didn't get a reply, so they felt something was wrong. Oshu, that. Did something bad happen to the host recently? Or was he bullied? Junpe, TSK, our streamer has always been a bully, right? Maybe it's because of my body? Chen Shiruyan, Auntie finally visited the streamer? Drink more hot water or brown sugar water. Don't be greedy for cold water. The audience scratched their ears and cheeks. Their way of showing concern was a little clumsy, but anyone with a discerning eye could see their sincerity. Compared to the audience's anxiety across the plain screen, it was more convenient for Cheng Yuan to be her secretary. Cheng Yuan asked, "Has the Lord encountered something troubling recently?" Jiang Pengji turned her head to look at him. She pursed her lips tightly and did not say a word. She only used her gaze to ask silently. Cheng Yuan said with slight awkwardness, "I haven't seen you for the past 2 days. You're always in low spirits." Jiang Pengji leaned back in boredom and said indifferently, "Nothing. I'm just bored and too lazy to move." Cheng Yuan thought about the hot weather outside and thought he had found a reason. "So it's Xia Yan." Jiang Pengji blinked and deliberately repeated, "No, I just find it boring." Cheng Yuan was puzzled. "What's boring?" Jiang Pengji sighed in her heart. In the end, she did not speak her mind. She wanted to say, "Fighting for the world is too boring, I don't want to play anymore." If the strategists in the tent knew what she was thinking at this moment, they would probably explode in anger. Before this moment, she had never felt such a tired emotion, but now it was like a volcano that had been suppressed for a long time, suddenly erupting. She asked Cheng Yuan, "If there is someone in this world who is exactly the same as me, would Gong Liao recognize the wrong lord?" Cheng Yuan was even more confused. He could not figure out the meaning behind Jiang Pengji's question and could only answer carefully. How can an ordinary person imitate the Lord? Even if they looked exactly the same, could they imitate the exact same temperament and behavior? "I'm loyal to my Lord. If I can't even tell my Lord apart, then I won't have the face to live in this world." When Cheng Yuan finished speaking, he was magnanimous. Jiang Pengji smiled. It was a rare smile for the past 2 days. "You're right. I'm the most unique person in this world. Not just anyone can replace me." Cheng Yuan couldn't help but let his imagination run wild. His lord wasn't someone who liked to be sad and sad. There must be a reason for her sudden depression. His expression suddenly became solemn. Could it be that someone has harbored evil intentions and is trying to use the technique of substituting master? When he blurted out these words, Cheng Yuan was also shocked by his own imagination. "Although it's not the target, it's not far." Jiang Pengji's answer horrified Cheng Yuan. "Wait a minute, how is this possible? Who has such ambition?" Cheng Yuan's eyes revealed a murderous intent. He already had the intention to kill the unknown target. As long as Jiang Pengji told him who that person was, Cheng Yuan would dig him out and kill him even if he had to dig 3 feet into the ground. "My lord, this matter concerns your safety. If you know anything, don't hide it, lest you give the villain an opportunity to take advantage of." In all fairness, Cheng Yuan didn't quite believe that this would happen. One's appearance could be faked, but how could one's temperament, habits, and memories be faked? Jiang Pengji had been with the officials in the tent for many years. They didn't dare to say that they completely understood their lord, but it was impossible for them to not know anything. If an impostor wanted to replace her, it wouldn't take long before the truth was revealed. In this way, was there still value in substituting master? Cheng Yuan was suspicious and worried, but his lord was smiling so easily that he didn't know what to do. "Ha ha ha, I'm just teasing you. It's just that I had a very realistic dream a few days ago. I found out that a demon copied my memory and took over my body. He took the opportunity to blend in with you. I couldn't tell the difference between a dream and reality for a while. I've been paranoid for the past 2 days and scared you instead. It's my fault." Jiang Pengji laughed and tried to deal with Cheng Yuan. However, she was very clear in her heart whether this was a joke or not. Lu Zhao hinted that the real Lu Shi was still alive, so she knew that things were not that simple. She could obtain the memory of the original Lu Shi with the help of the system. Who knew if the original could obtain her memory from the system? Because Jiang Pengji guarded against the system and protected the memory of the brain very well, the memory system before her transmigration could not be hacked and copied. The memory after her transmigration was uncertain. As long as the memory was copied, when she unified the world, the system would then give the recorded memory to the original, Lu Shi. Then, who knew if that Lu Shi could perfectly replace her? The purpose of the system was clear from the beginning to the end. It wanted an important source of energy, not only the popularity of the streaming room, but also the luck that could not be understood. According to the saying of ancient times, those who were blessed with luck were people with great luck, such as the emperor or other members of the royal family. Therefore, the system instigated Jiang Pengji to strive for the path of becoming an empress in the palace. The empress or the women in the harem were the existence closest to the emperor. It was very convenient for the system to seize luck. However, Jiang Pengji did not play her cards according to common sense. She wanted to be the emperor herself and conveniently dissed the two systems. The system could only find another way. Didn't she want to be the emperor? Then the system would cultivate a puppet that could perfectly replace her and help her become the emperor. It would be more convenient and unscrupulous to absorb luck. She thought that the spirit of the original Lu Shi had completely disappeared. The system had also given her such a misleading message. But she did not think of another possibility. Perhaps the original Lu Shi had not disappeared, but was imprisoned somewhere by the system? If the original Lu Shi was used as a trump card to deal with her, it would be a very good card. It would definitely be able to catch her unprepared. Analyzing from all aspects, substituting the original Lu Shi was the most efficient method. If Lu Zhao had not secretly informed her, Jiang Pengji would have taken a long time to realize this. Thinking of this, she could not help but frown. She felt that fighting for the world was boring and depressed. It was not that she was afraid of the person behind the scenes, but she did not like people coveting her achievements. She was the one who dug the pit, she was the one who cultivated the saplings, she was the one who fertilized, killed the insects, and pollinated the crops. After all this work, the fruits that were about to ripen were plucked by someone else. The bully had already come to her doorstep. Was she not allowed to explode? If she could, she really wanted to break the jar and ask the person behind the scenes to come out and fight for the bean-sized farm. She would not accompany him. Her depressed mood did not last long. Soon, she was stimulated by a battle report. Quickly prepare the troops and horses. They did not know how to pick a day to fight a war. Chapter 1173. Speaking of that day, Qiguan Rang had forced Yuan Xian's army to retreat and caused them heavy losses. Yuan Xian had successfully escaped with his defeated army, like a stray dog. Although they had successfully burned 50,000 dawn of the enemy's rations, they had paid the price of half the casualties. As the commander, Yuan Xian's crime was unforgivable. Yuan Xian's personality was more impulsive and he had made many enemies. Those people took advantage of this opportunity to kick him when he was down. Who asked Yuan Xian to be so arrogant and make such a military pledge? Yuan Xian was a person with high aspirations, an arrogant personality, and strong self-esteem. He was usually respected by others. When had he ever been pushed down by others? For a moment, he couldn't suppress his grief and anger. He said, "This is indeed my fault, but I am not willing to accept punishment. The main culprit is someone else." Huang Song subconsciously furrowed his brows. He wanted to punish Yuan Xian heavily to clean up the atmosphere, but if he did that, it would inevitably disappoint the old general. He was already in a difficult situation. He didn't expect Yuan Xian to say something like this. What did he mean by, "the main culprit is someone else"? Before Huang Song could find an excuse to send Yuan Xian away, Yuan Xian said, "I suspect that someone has colluded with the enemy and leaked information. Colluded with the enemy and leaked information? Hearing these words, Huang Song's ears couldn't help but perk up. What do you mean colluded with the enemy and leaked information? Thinking of Yuan Xian's usual personality, Huang Song felt that this old fellow's words couldn't be completely trusted. Yuan Xian pointed. Everyone looked in the direction he was pointing and were all shocked. Everyone had different reactions. Nye Sun was about to explode. He couldn't help but stand up and scold, Yuan Xian, if you are afraid of punishment, just say it. Why do you have to accuse me? He was really angry. His usual gentle demeanor were all thrown to the back of his head. The veins on his forehead were bulging. Yuan Xian said, that day, when I volunteered to go out to intercept the rations, do you still remember what you said? Nye Sun was stunned. What did he say? Yuan Xian said, you said that I don't know much about the terrain in Hu County. If you let me lead the army and we fail to intercept the grain, we'll be surrounded and fall into the enemy's trap. How can I escape? Why didn't I know that you, Nye Chengyun, had the ability to predict the future? It's no secret that you and I don't get along. This old man also made you lose face, causing you to lose the chance to recommend a new general and form a clique for personal gain. It's hard to guarantee that you, Nye Chengyun, won't harbor a grudge in your heart in order to frame this old man and secretly use underhanded methods. Nye Sun scolded angrily, what kind of bullshit are you spouting? Did they really think that he, Nye Sun, wouldn't swear? Did they really think that he was made of clay and didn't have a temper? After saying that, Nye Sun even drew his sword from his waist. If it weren't for the fact that a few of his colleagues saw that the situation was getting out of hand and stopped him, he would have really taken up his sword and fought with Yuan Xian alone. Being able to beat him was secondary. The main point was that he absolutely could not endure this humiliation. Yuan Xian sneered, could it be that you're angry out of humiliation? Huang Song's patience with Yuan Xian had also run out. He couldn't help but say, victory and defeat are common in military affairs. Commandant Yuan, don't be obsessed. In other words, he wanted Yuan Xian to be more open-minded and not go around biting people after losing a game. Even if Huang Song didn't really trust Nye Sun, it was really unsightly for Yuan Xian to go around biting people like a mad dog. Yuan Xian, however, didn't understand the meaning behind it. Instead, he thought that Huang Song was comforting him. He had the right to think so. Huang Song needed the support of his family, so he was more tolerant and kind to the generals who came from his family. Yuan Xian said, why didn't my lord investigate the route and terrain of the south road of Xing City in Hu County? Even if the troops under Lu Shi's tent were divine soldiers, if there wasn't an early warning and no one colluded with the enemy, how could they mobilize troops to the exit of the south road of Xing City in such a short time and set up an ambush in advance? Even if they arrived, they would be a tired army, and it would be even more impossible for them to kill half of their troops. It had to be said that Yuan Xian's rhythm was indeed very good. It was almost perfect. Except for a few strategists who found the loopholes in his words, the others all believed in Yuan Xian's imagination and speculation. At first, it really sounded like it. Seeing this, Nye Sun was so angry that he blacked out and fainted. Everyone was so scared that they panicked again. At this time, Feng Zhu wasn't present, so only Qing Jing could say a few words of justice for Nye Sun. Old Commandant Yuan, you're wrong. Qing Jing said with a cold face, the enemy is familiar with the terrain of Hu County, so it's not a problem for them to take a shortcut. After a rapid march, they can indeed reach the south road of Xing City in advance and set up an ambush. They are tired soldiers, but the old commandant didn't notice. They only know how to break out of the encirclement, but they don't know how to react. Why do they only defend and not attack? Isn't it to disturb our army's morale and make the old commandant lose his rationality and sense of propriety? Most of the soldiers who died were not killed by sharp blades, but by fire. Old Commandant, you can't even see through this? No one knew that ever since Nie Sun fainted from being bitten by Yuan Xian, Cheng Jing had the intention to kill him. Keeping such a person around would cause more conflicts between the civil and military officials under the Lord's command. Sooner or later, there would be a big mess. Huang Song couldn't stand it anymore. He called for a military doctor for Nie Sun and told Yuan Xian to go away and reflect on his actions. He would punish Nie Sun after he woke up. My lord, we can't indulge old Commandant Yuan anymore. Cheng Jing had a headache. After today, Nie Sun and Huang Song would definitely have a complete separation. Even if they didn't, Nie Sun wouldn't be as selfless and loyal as before. Huang Song heard the complaint in Cheng Jing's words. What was there to complain about? Complaining that Huang Song was biased towards his own family and treated others poorly. This would only cause the officials to have a different opinion and gradually alienate them from the Lord. Huang Song hardened his heart and said, I will give Cheng Yun an explanation. Cheng Jing could only hope that it was not too late to salvage the situation. Who would have thought that the conflict between Yuan Xian and Nie Sun would escalate from a trivial matter to such a serious one? When Nie Sun woke up, Huang Song held his little hand and said a bunch of intimate words. Nie Sun maintained a weak smile the whole time and occasionally responded. Other than himself, no one knew what he was thinking. There were still cracks in a broken mirror, let alone a person's heart. Under Yuan Xian's various death-seeking efforts, Nie Sun developed a deep animosity towards Huang Song. Fortunately, they still had a common enemy to deal with. For the time being, they didn't have the energy to engage in any internal strife. The conflict between the people under Huang Song's command was also temporarily diverted because of the war. South Xingcheng intercepted the rations. Our side suffered heavy casualties and the enemy lost 50,000 dawn of rations. It was barely considered a draw. Huang Song was about to prepare for the next step when he suddenly received a secret letter from Su Bei. In this war, Su Bei was the main force. Huang Song was only a support. Su Bei's troops and Jiang Pengji's troops fought on the Sichuan plains to attract the main force. He requested Huang Song to bypass the main force and launch a sneak attack on Hu County. Although Jiang Pengji had a few supply lines, they were all concentrated in Hu County. Once Hu County was lost and the rations were cut off, their side would gain the upper hand. Chapter 1174. Cheng Jing lowered his eyelids slightly and said solemnly, My lord previously sent old Lieutenant Yuan to attack the grain supply line in Hu County. Although he succeeded in burning the enemy's 50,000 dawn of grain, he also alerted the enemy. How could Lu Shi let his guard down? Now that we're using the same trick again, I'm afraid the effect will be minimal. With regards to Su Bei's request, Cheng Jing didn't think highly of it. Su Bei and Jiang Pengji's battle at Sichuan Plain had indeed attracted the attention of most of the troops, but this didn't mean that Huang Song could easily infiltrate the enemy's rear without any risk. The long-distance march was secondary. They were afraid that Jiang Pengji would react quickly and cut off Huang Song's main force's retreat. Hu County was a major grain-producing county. It was also the main supply channel for Jiang Pengji's army. How could it be unguarded? It was true that Huang Song and Su Bei had formed an alliance, but they wouldn't go so far as to put themselves in a perilous situation for an ally. This seemed like an easy job, but in reality, it was hard work without any benefits. No one knew who had given Su Bei such an idea. This was too much of a trap for their allies. It wasn't that Huang Song didn't understand Cheng Jing's words. However, this was the first time he was working with Su Bei in an alliance. It wasn't good to shirk responsibility. They had formed an alliance because of their interests and standpoint. There was no basis for trust at all. This relationship seemed strong, but in reality, it was very fragile. Without any basis of trust, this meant that the outside world could split their alliance from the inside as long as there were enough benefits. Even if they couldn't be divided, the so-called alliance would be useless. That's true, but how do we get rid of this without hurting our friendship? Huang Song asked him. Qing Jing said, either you tell us the truth, or you send troops to pretend to attack Hu County. Told the truth? Huang Song couldn't react for a moment. Qing Jing said, of course it's about the original commandant intercepting the rations. Huang Song had already mobilized troops to rob their grain supply. If he were to rob them again in a short period of time, would they be defenseless? This wasn't a sneak attack, it was a suicidal attack. Huang Song frowned awkwardly, but he didn't directly say yes or no. At the same time, the Sichuan plain was also in full swing. Jiang Pengji had conquered the northern borderline and Sangzhou. She could be considered wealthy and overbearing. She had built up another batch of cavalry in a short period of time. The terrain of the Sichuan plains was wide, and it was extremely suitable for cavalry to roam and scatter, or for heavy cavalry to charge and cut through. She had never been stingy with her family's private treasury. Not to mention her wife's money, she had even taken out her coffin money to strengthen the army. The moment the two armies clashed, Su Bei was undoubtedly at a disadvantage. Regardless of whether it was a head-on clash or a mobile battle, he wasn't a match for them. Han Yu, who was at home and refused to see any visitors, couldn't sit still when he heard about this. Lu Shi owns 2 major horse farms in the northern borderline and Sangzhou. He has plenty of warhorses under his command. Who gave you the courage to fight him in the Sichuan plain? When Han Yu received the news, he was boiling tea in the courtyard. He was so angry that he knocked over the teapot and almost scalded his hand. Upon further investigation, they discovered that this foolish idea had actually been suggested by one of Su Pei's strategists. If we can defeat the enemy army head-on, our morale will be greatly boosted. Han Yu also knew this counselor. The counselor was well versed in theory, but he had almost zero practical experience. He could be considered as another armchair strategist. At the same time, the other party also gave his own reasons. At first glance, those reasons sounded quite reasonable. It was not that the strategist had not thought about the problem of cavalry, but Jiang Pengji had conquered Sangzhou for less than half a year and conquered the northern borderline for only a year. How strong could a cavalry troop be built in such a short time? The cost of training cavalry was very high. Not only did it burn money, but it also consumed a lot of time. Moreover, no matter how strong the cavalry was, as long as there were not many of them, it would not be difficult to deal with them. Excluding the advantage of cavalry, the combat strength of the two sides should not be too different. Sichuan Plain was their main battlefield, so it was not impossible for them to win. Su Pei and the others had thought of everything. The only thing they did not consider was the time Jiang Pengji had spent on training the cavalry. In order to deal with the northern borderline, she had started the formation of the cavalry battalion a few years ago. It was not a year or half a year like everyone thought. During the battle at the northern borderline, the number of cavalry under her command was not large. It was not because she was hiding her strength, but because she did not have enough warhorses. After conquering the northern borderline and Sangzhou, the number of warhorses increased, and the cavalry battalion suddenly expanded several times. After losing the first battle, Su Pei had no choice but to send someone to pull out Han Yu, who was squatting at home and planting mushrooms. As soon as Han Yu came over, he asked Su Pei to withdraw his troops and choose to retreat to the mountain pass. This was to suppress the cavalry's advantage. The cavalry was not omnipotent, but ordinary infantry needed a lot of preparation to fight against cavalry. They also needed to coordinate with the terrain to be effective. For example, in mountainous areas, forests, and valleys, the cavalry's combat strength and survival ability would be greatly reduced. The terrain of Sichuan Plain was vast. It was simply a paradise for cavalry. Not to mention that Lu Shi had the heavy cavalry battalion under his command. No matter how strong their defense was, they would not be able to withstand the joint attack of thousands of heavy cavalry. Instead of choosing to fight head-on, it was better to retreat and use the terrain to stabilize the military situation. Han Yu was cautious by nature. If this battle had been handed to him from the beginning, even if he did not know the strength of the enemy, he would have chosen the safest way to fight. After stabilizing the situation, he would then think of ways to expand the results of the battle. Blindly greedy would only cause him to be consigned to eternal damnation. His choice was a harsh slap to the face of the previous strategist. However, Su Pei valued Han Yu so much that he could not even speak sarcastically. Han Yu did not know how the other party felt. He was only concerned about the situation of the battlefield, such as the losses in the previous battle. When Su Pei withdrew his troops and retreated to defend, Yang Si knew that Han Yu had come out again. Isn't he at home closing his door to guests? Is that a disguised form of confinement? Han Yu was Yang Si's nemesis. Yang Si had no temper at all when faced with this fellow. Qin Gong said, Han Yu is Su Bei's most trusted strategist. The two of them had a small conflict, but it will not be a stalemate forever. Ordinary couples fight at the head of the bed and reconcile at the end, not to mention the importance of this battle. Even if Han Yu has a grudge against him, he will not sit idly by. Yang Si, who was originally burning with anger, could not say a word. Qin Gong's honest analogy made him feel like he could not bear to look straight at it. Yang Si did not speak. Qin Gong asked again, strategist, is it possible that I have said something wrong? No. Yang Si put down his hand and coughed softly. It makes sense. Qin Gong asked, what should we do now? Su Bei's army has retreated and the surrounding area is filled with forests and hills. If Su Bei and his men were to stay here, the combat strength of the cavalry would be equivalent to being crippled unless they found a way to lure them out. Of course, the other way was to attack by force. This would increase the number of casualties. Just as Yang Si was hesitating, the messenger sent news that their lord had dispatched troops to the front line. Yang Si, no way, their lord had finally settled down for a while. Why did she suddenly run to the front line? If their lord wanted to show off in the battle, how could he dissuade her? I'm done for, Yang Si mumbled. Qin Gong asked, what's done for? I'm done for. Chapter 1175. Yang Si didn't know if it was an illusion, but he felt that something was wrong with his lord these 2 days. She was like a firecracker that would explode at the slightest touch. Feng Jing, how do you feel after following the lord to attack the city for the past 2 days? Yang Si did not dare to ask Jiang Pengji directly, so he tried to get information from Qin Gong in private. Qin Gong was silent for a moment. He thought of how his lord had charged into battle and couldn't help but shiver. Only after a long while did he speak hesitantly. My lord is a true man. Yang Si, **T, isn't this something that everyone knows? Who asked you about this? Yang Si asked, don't you think that lord has been particularly angry recently? Usually, they did not reveal themselves and looked very normal. However, when they fought, they were several times more ferocious than before. They fought without any regard for their lives. Although they did not manage to break through Su Bei's army's defensive line, after 2 consecutive days, Su Bei's defense seemed to be straining. Qin Gong asked hesitantly, really? I have only been with His Highness for a short period of time and do not understand him as well as the military counselor. After saying that, the upright young general revealed an ashamed expression, as if he had committed a grave mistake. Yang Si said, our lord is not like this usually. She knows when to stop fighting. If she can avoid getting hurt, she will. Unlike now, Qin Gong, it turned out that in the eyes of his military counselor Yang, the Lord's arm being scratched by a stray arrow was also considered an injury? It was really just a scratch on the arm. He had seen it before. The wound was as long as a pinky finger. It was shallow and only the skin was scratched. Yang Xi's worries were not unreasonable. Jiang Pengji indeed vented her negative emotions through the war. She had killed to her heart's content, but it was a pity for those who had died under her blade. None of them had a complete corpse. The god-slaying blade had a unique origin. It was a weapon that was on par with the Federation's marshal's blade. It could easily slice through space armors, much less a human body. She killed for a while until her arm was scratched by a stray arrow. A slight pain came from her arm, and she calmed down. No matter what happened to the original, Lu Shi, the owner of this body was her, not anyone else. If Lu Shi wanted to take back his body, Jiang Pengji would not be so thick-skinned as to forcefully occupy it. But if she had the idea of reaping the fruits of victory and forcefully taking over everything that did not belong to her, then she could not blame Jiang Pengji for being ruthless. Jiang Pengji recovered from her low spirits and returned to her usual self. His main focus now was to conquer the world and take over the entire farm as soon as possible. By then, the people hiding in the dark would jump out. What could be more frustrating than being knocked down from the peak when you were about to win? Jiang Pengji had never been a kind person. Since he had offended her to death, then don't blame her for being ruthless and taking revenge. She was able to restrain her ambition and climb her way up from a genetic warrior to the position of the commander of an entire army. How could she not have some patience? Nothing was important, as long as she was the final winner. Jiang Pengji confronted Su Pei at the front lines. The group quietly departed from Hejin County and headed north to Chongzhou. When Gu Zhen appeared in front of Madame Hu, the latter was stunned. Why didn't you stay in Hejin County to recuperate? Why did you come here? Madame Hu was dressed in plain clothes. Even though she had no makeup on, her natural charm was enough to make all the women in the world jealous. He put you under house arrest? Gu Zhen frowned and looked around at the decorations in the house. It was cold and bleak. Madame Hu said, "Isn't it obvious? Why did he do that?" The second madam did not understand. "It's because I let Zhao escape. He wanted him to marry a hunter's daughter. Zhao doesn't like it, and neither do I," Madame Hu sneered. Her plump red lips were cold. "Just because of this reason, he locked me up here." Gu Zhen's expression was very solemn. "How could this be?" Madame Hu said, "Why not? Lanting hasn't even unified Dongqing yet, and he already thinks of himself as the emperor." Faced with Madame Hu's sarcasm, the second madam said, "By Dai." Madame Hu said, "Humph, are you here to persuade him?" The second madam said, "Of course not. I think you've misunderstood something." "Shut up, Gu Zhen." Madame Hu was so angry that she stood up and glared at the second madam. She sneered and said arrogantly, "I've said it before. Don't mess around in front of me. She's just the daughter of a concubine who stole Gu Min's status. I don't need you to interfere with what I do." The two of them did not have a good relationship. They could maintain a facade in front of outsiders, but once there was no one around, they would completely reveal their true colors. Gu Zhen's expression changed. She said, "I really don't know what's wrong with you. Why have you treated Lu Shi like this all these years?" She still remembered that Bai Dai and Lu Shi had a good relationship. They were childhood sweethearts and cousins. After Lu Shi married Gu Min, the two of them rarely contacted each other. Later, Bai Dai became Lu Shi's concubine. Logically speaking, the two of them should have been closer, but now they were like enemies. There was almost no buffer time for such a big change. It was as if everything had changed overnight. "You don't need to care about this." Madame Hu's attitude was overbearing and unreasonable. Gu Zhen said, "If it wasn't for my sister, I wouldn't have cared about you." Madame Hu said, "Don't be so arrogant. You can say nice things, but you still have to snatch. Can you refute that?" There were a few things that she hated the most in her life. One of them was that Gu Zhen had replaced Gu Min as Lu Shi's legal wife. Although Lu Shi was not a good person, only Gu Min was worthy of the position of legal wife. Gu Zhen did not want to be entangled with Madame Hu on this issue. The two of them had argued over this issue more than 100 times. Gu Zhen said, "I know your temperament. There must be a reason why your attitude towards Lu Shi changed so much. I asked you before, but you always refused to tell me. Now that your relationship with Lu Shi is so strained, are you still going to hide it from me? Does this have anything to do with my sister?" Madame Hu said, "If I said that Gu Min did not die of illness, but was strangled by Lu Shi with a white silk, would you believe me?" Gu Zhen's eyes widened and her mind went blank when she suddenly tossed out a huge bomb. "Bai Dai, what did Bai Dai say? Are you kidding me? How could brother-in-law use a white silk too? This was simply the biggest joke in the world. Why not? I saw it with my own eyes. Although I didn't see the person, I saw the shadow through the door and window. It was indeed Lu Shi who strangled her with a white silk." Gu Zhen finally revealed the secret that she had suppressed for more than 10 years. The next day, Lu Shi pretended that nothing had happened. He even pretended to show such a disgusting expression, as if he was really in love with Gu Min *t, it was all fake. Gu Zhen really wanted to say something, but the door outside suddenly opened. The two of them heard the movement and turned their heads in unison. They saw a middle-aged man in a scholar's robe standing at the door. Chapter 1176. Lu Shi's appearance was too sudden. The atmosphere suddenly dropped to a freezing point. Both Bai Dai and Xiaochen felt a sense of fear and helplessness from the bottom of their hearts. However, Bai Dai quickly calmed down. She sneered at the food box in Lu Shi's hand and said sarcastically, "How long have you been standing outside? Do you want to give me my last meal and then use that white silk to choke me to death like how you strangled Gu Min?" Lu Shi's eyes were dark and gloomy. In the past, Lu Shi was always warm, like the warm sun in spring. He didn't make people feel hot or cold. He was neither hot nor cold, just right. His eyes were also slightly pale. Under the light, they had a kind of amber texture, but now they were like black ink, giving people an inexplicable coldness. Uncharacteristically, Lu Shi didn't speak. Instead, he stared coldly at Bai Dai. Gu Zhen, who was standing beside him, calmed down. Fear grew in her heart. Is what Bai Dai said true? Gu Zhen suppressed the urge to shake her hands and stared at Lu Shi's expression. Sister, did you really strangle her with a piece of white silk? Why did you do that? What reason do you have to do that? Lu Zhongqing, say something." After a while, Lu Shi stepped into the room and raised his right hand to put the food box on the table. His tone was flat as he spoke to Bai Dai. "You're possessed. I saw it with my own eyes. You're saying I'm possessed? Lu Shi, if you're a man, just admit it. Why are you denying it?" Since they had already fallen out, Bai Dai didn't want to pretend anymore. God knew how hard it had been for her all these years. Every time she saw Lu Shi's affectionate face, she wanted to scratch him. Don't you know what happens to a person's body if they were strangled with white silk? Lu Shi's reaction was very calm. He could even rationally point out the loopholes in Madame Hu's words. You should know what happens to Gu Min's body. There are no traces of her being strangled with white silk. Gu Min and I loved each other very much. She just gave birth to a child for me. What reason do I have to kill my wife? Bai Dai was furious. The second madam saw Lu Shi's reaction and took a few steps back in fear. Lu Shi refuted the fact that he had killed his wife, but his reaction proved that he was right. Think about it, if Lu Shi really loved Gu Min to the core, how could he be so calm when he suddenly found out about this absurd thing? Gu Zhen did not dare to accept this fact, but Bai Dai was so angry that she raised her hand and slapped her. Lu Shi, you are the most disgusting person I have ever met in my life. The expected sound didn't come. Instead, her wrist was accurately grabbed by Lu Shi, like an iron clamp. Lu Shi didn't use much strength, but Bai Dai screamed in pain and almost fainted. Her wrist was almost crushed. I didn't kill Ah Min. If you keep spouting nonsense, I'm afraid I'll have to resort to some extreme measures. Lu Shi raised his hand and flung her wrist away. Then, he stood up gracefully and prepared to leave. Lu Zhongqing, when you ignored her pleas for mercy and personally strangled her, were you happy? Lu Shi's silhouette froze. He turned his head to look at Bai Dai and said, I didn't kill Ah Min. She died of illness. You have to remember that. Gu Zhen shuddered involuntarily. She still couldn't accept what was happening in front of her. Bai Dai sneered, if you don't want people to know, then don't do it. You might be able to fool a 3-year-old, but do you think I'm blind? Let's not talk about Ah Min first. Why did you let Zhao marry a hunter's daughter from nowhere? What are you thinking? Lu Shi said, her father once saved Ah Min's life. What's wrong with letting Zhao marry his daughter and take care of her for the rest of her life? Bai Dai said, Lu Zhongqing, that is Ah Min's only surviving son. How could you humiliate him like this? You wanted to treat him as a bastard son and treat him like a bastard son. I agreed, but I didn't dare to get close to him. Now you want to ruin the rest of his life? Lu Shi said, I did it for his own good. Bai Dai sneered, for his own good? You did it for his own good. Your solution was to make him a lowly bastard son. Now he is being suppressed by a lonely soul of unknown origin. Lu Shi is your daughter. You know that the so-called 2 souls in one body are fake, but you can still accept a lonely soul without any grudge. Don't you feel sorry for your daughter? What she really wanted to ask was whether Lu Shi was still human. Lu Shi said, one day, you will understand. I don't understand. I only believe the truth that I see for myself. You killed your wife and Gu Min. You abandoned your daughter and let the evildoer take over her body and get away with it. You made the honorable son of Lu Shi a bastard and raised him to be useless. Lu Zhongqing, what are your intentions? Bai Dai's words were full of blood, but Lu Shi didn't seem to hear it. I told you, you don't understand. You devil. Bai Dai had a bad temper. She had always been unmoved by force or persuasion. Lu Shi's words didn't work at all. Instead, it triggered the resistance that she had suppressed for many years. She covered her rapidly red and swollen wrist and said angrily, Lu Shi, who was as beautiful as the moon, died a long time ago. Where did you come from, evildoer? You caused the death of Gu Min's family. Are you still not satisfied? Yes. Lu Shi was the evildoer. Bai Dai's chest rose and fell violently. Her emotions were completely out of control. If the second madam hadn't come back to her senses and stopped her, she would have pounced on Lu Shi. You too. Lu Shi finally turned around and looked at the two of them. His eyes were still cold. Let me calm down. After saying that, Lu Shi left without looking back. His footsteps sounded as if he was fleeing for his life. Let me go. After Lu Shi left, Bai Dai finally lost her temper and pushed the second madam aside. Do you want to die? The second madam stopped her. If you continue to provoke him, he might really kill you. He's not a man if he doesn't kill me. I don't expect him to spare my life if he dares to kill his beloved wife. Bai Dai was still emotional, but the second madam refused to let her go. The two of them could only stand there in a stalemate. What was Lu Shi doing at that moment? He staggered back to his study and slammed the door. He fell to the ground as if he had used up all his strength. His forehead was covered in sweat. As time passed, he curled up into a ball. The veins on his forehead bulged. It was terrifying. Do you really think you are Lu Shi? I'm not satisfied with your performance today. Lu Shi's eyes were closed. He breathed hot air through his nose and mouth as if he had fallen asleep. How did Gu Min die? Correct your position and identity. You have no right to question me like this. I'll ask you again. How did Gu Min die? Because of Lu Shi's resistance, the voice in his head was silent for a while before it spoke again. I said she was an outsider. She was destined to be rejected by the plane's consciousness and return to her own world. Bai Dai said you strangled her with my body. Chapter 1177. Lu Shi clenched his fists. He bit his pale lips so hard that they started to bleed. The voice was refuting his explanation, but Lu Shi knew that what Bai Dai said was mostly true. You wanted to kill Bai Dai. If I didn't stop you, they would have been strangled by you. Lu Shi looked calm and said indifferently, if there was no inside story behind Ah Min's death, why did you try to kill her? Why? The voice in his head didn't respond. Lu Shi said to himself, she was just an ordinary person. Gu Zhen and the others couldn't accept the truth, and neither could Lu Shi. If the truth was wrong from the beginning, then wouldn't his years of planning be a joke? Bai Dai's questions rang in Lu Shi's ears. His mind was shaken and he almost choked. An ordinary person? If she was an ordinary person, she wouldn't have the ability to seduce you and me. You disappoint me. You and I are one, and we are complete when we are together. Now you want to be independent because of an ordinary woman. That's great. Lu Shi clenched his fists. His blood was boiling, and his mind was full of complicated thoughts. Isn't this your problem? Lu Shi said, feelings are always changeable and uncontrollable factors. Lu Shi remembered clearly that he knew a lot of things from the moment he was born, but there was always a force that made him develop into a playboy. Ever since he met Gu Min, he was confused about what he wanted. However, Gu Min was the daughter of the Gu family and one of the two beauties of Langia. She was not someone he could match. Even though they were childhood sweethearts by marriage, the elders in his family never thought of letting him be with Gu Min. Lu Shi wanted to work hard, but at the same time, he was controlled by the strange force to stay away from the study and indulge in fun. It wasn't until 2 years before Gu Min's marriage proposal that Lu Shi met an immortal. He was coaxed to eat a magical elixir, and suddenly remembered everything. He was ordered to impersonate Lu Shi, but he didn't go through the proper process of reincarnation, so his memory was forcibly sealed by the plane's consciousness. Lu Shi didn't feel relieved when his memory was restored. Instead, he became more and more afraid. This kind of fear reached its peak with the death of the 2 eldest sons. According to history, Lu Shi never had a legitimate son. You and Gu Min are both imposters. Would your legitimate son be allowed to exist? Lu Shi knew that the consciousness of the plane would eliminate the anomalies in order to protect its own interests. Looking at his clever daughter, Lu Shi felt as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. If the 2 legitimate sons could not stand, then the legitimate daughter in front of him, who had both soul and soul, this body was specially prepared by the plane's consciousness for the child of destiny. Now, it has been taken by your daughter. Do you know that? The familiar voice was like a death knell, causing Lu Shi to be immersed in fear at every moment. Lu Shi was at a loss. What should I do? Tell me, what should I do? Let's go with the flow and wait patiently for the child of providence to come. Only by absorbing enough, will you be able to save their souls. Wait for the son of providence? Didn't this mean that the daughter would? Lu Shi wanted to say something but stopped. His heart was filled with an unprecedented disgust and worry. However, he didn't dare to show it. Seeing that Gu Min was pregnant with her third child and that she was smiling again, he heaved a sigh of relief. If he followed the flow of history, Min's child, regardless of whether it was a boy or a girl, had to be born of a concubine. This should be able to deceive the plane's consciousness and also send away the stupid and greedy time traveler. He thought that everything would develop in a good direction, but unexpectedly, Gu Min's body rapidly weakened after giving birth and she died soon after. No matter how Lu Shi investigated, he could only find out that Gu Min's death had something to do with the time traveler who had taken over Wang Huiyun's body. Lu Shi chose to reincarnate as a human, so he lost the convenience and ability of his original race. In order to take revenge, he adopted Wang Huiyun and Prince Changshuo's daughter as a concubine's daughter, named her Lu Huan, and set out to take revenge. It wasn't just Wang Huiyun, the child of providence, but also the malicious plane's consciousness. Lu Shi often wondered what Gu Min had done wrong. It wasn't her original intention to time travel. After she time traveled, she behaved herself and didn't do anything out of line. Even though she was different from the original Gu Min, what she did was beneficial to the original history and not harmful to the future child of providence. Compared to the entire plane, she wasn't even a speck of dust. Why couldn't it tolerate her? Lu Shi knew that the plane's consciousness had the ability to repel outsiders. Once an ordinary soul like Gu Min, who had no background, was caught, she would be sent back to her original plane at best, or her soul would be destroyed. The decades of comfortable life made him forget the danger. The only fortunate thing was that Gu Min's soul wasn't destroyed. She was just sent back the way she came. If Lu Shi wanted to find her, not only would he have to accurately locate her from countless planes, but he would also have to break the barrier between two planes. The difficulty of this task was even more unbelievable than asking his original body to fall in love and give up on revenge. Humph, look at your cowardly look. It's really embarrassing. Lu Shi didn't say anything. He had long been used to being despised by the other. If you still want to see Gu Min, it's not impossible. At that time, Lu Shi was in the most desperate situation of his life. The voice was the last straw that he had to hold on to. What is it? As long as we use the child of providence to destroy the plane's fate, you and I will regain our peak strength. Breaking the barrier of the plane is nothing. Lu Shi frowned. That's a high-level plane with a high-level civilization. Although the level of civilization in the environment where Gu Min lived was still very low, because of the intervention of the child of providence, that plane was directly promoted to a high-level plane. There were thousands of planes in the world, and the high-level plane was the plane with the greatest potential. The barrier of the plane was very strong and extremely difficult to break. As far as I know, the plane we are in now and Gu Min's plane belong to the twin plane. If the two planes were compared to each other, it would be easier to understand the concept of the twin plane. Simply put, that plane had the potential to be promoted to a high-level plane, and now this plane also had the potential to be promoted. If that wasn't the case, why would the child of providence go back and forth? If you can take over this plane, your heart's desire will become a reality. Regardless of whether what the original body said was true or false, Lu Shi could only choose to believe it. Okay, I will start the layout. You can't just bet on one side. The child of providence isn't that easy to fool. You have to be more prepared. I know. Lu Shi looked down. If it's done, you should be able to regain your strength, right? The other said happily. Almost. But before that, I still have to rely on that stupid woman to absorb a small amount of fate. Lu Shi said, when that time comes, we will be two independent entities. Don't think that I will return to my original body. Chapter 1178. From the moment of separation, you and I are two independent entities. I am not your vassal. Lu Shi barely regained his senses. Because of his return to reason, he had to restrain himself from completely falling out with the other party. Perhaps the target of his revenge would not only be the previous ones, but also one more. This is just your personal opinion, a foolish and naive one. Do you think that by possessing a human body and living as a human for decades, you are really a human in your bones? Even if you are willing to be a human, you still have to ask the consciousness of this plane and the patrolling merchant if they are willing to let you go. Gu Min was lucky enough to be expelled, but what about you? Your soul was destroyed and turned into cosmic dust. If you insist on being independent and resist my fusion, neither of us can resist the harm of the outside world. Are you willing to die like this? The voice knew Lu Shi's weakness too well because Lu Shi was the love it had separated. Gu Min and the few human children she had were his weakness. Looking at Lu Shi's useless appearance, it was even more glad that it had separated its love back then. Emotions were indeed a hindrance to it. But no matter how much it despised Lu Shi, it couldn't let him run around outside. It had to find a way to take him back as soon as possible. Lu Shi said coldly, "Do you think I will agree to your request if I know that you killed Ah Min with your own hands? You piece of trash." The voice was silent for a while, then said resentfully, "The patrolling merchant is already in this plane." "That person is already here?" Lu Shi's eyes widened in shock. "Why isn't he?" The main system hid very well. As a part of it, Lu Shi didn't know the exact location of the other party's hiding place. It was normal that the patrolling merchant couldn't find the main system, but Lu Shi had transformed into a human and lost his special ability, so there was nowhere to hide. The main system was silent for a while, as if there was a problem with the circuit, and the communication wasn't very sensitive. "Humph, who knows what these old foxes want to do? You don't have to think that you are lucky. They haven't done anything to you now because you are the father of the Son of Destiny. This identity is connected to the karma of the Son of Destiny. That guy can't do anything to you. No matter what the reason is, he won't let us go. If you want to live, the only way out is to merge with me again and restore your strength." Before it was sliced up and separated from itself, the main system was in a heavily injured state, and its strength could not compare to when it was at its peak. It had spent more than 2,000 years traveling to hundreds of low-level planes, tricking those stupid and greedy women into working for it under the guise of the system and the Goldfinger. In total, it had seized the luck of the dragon veins of more than 200 low-level planes. Unfortunately, it was unknown whether it was because it had done too many immoral things in the previous half of its life or something else, but it was always not favored by the heavenly Tao, and its luck was always a little bad. Every time he regained a certain level of strength, he would always run into a nemesis that could restrain him. It would either be a planar patrolling merchant who happened to travel to that plane, or that disgusting master-disciple couple. He would never admit defeat so easily, if it weren't for the fact that he was cunning enough to make sufficient preparations to escape every time. He wouldn't have been able to cut off his tail to survive every time. He had escaped from death time and time again, and would have been caught and hammered to death long ago. The main system had done some careful calculations. Right now, this plane was a high-level reserve with high potential. It had a majestic destiny. If it could gather the destiny of the Son of Destiny and destroy the foundation of the entire plane, it would be able to absorb enough energy, enough to restore it to its peak state. Unfortunately, its luck was as bad as ever. Just as it was happily slicing up the plane and preparing to play with the Son of Destiny, the few fragrant bodies that were separated from it made it feel like its balls were about to explode. The one that followed the female protagonist, Wang Huiyun, was not bad, and it had transferred a lot of energy to it for more than 20 years. The one that followed Jiang Pengji was simply pretending to be dead. Lu Shi was the most useless, and he was directly seduced by Gu Min. These useless people could not be counted on. Their final value was to return to the main body and strengthen its strength. It had never thought that Lu Shi, the useless person, would still want to be independent. For all, did this useless person still remember the mission he was carrying? For the death of an ordinary human woman, he was still stubborn now. Who gave him face? The main system anxiously wanted to take back the separated fragrant bodies, but Lu Shi refused to cooperate. I refuse. Lu Shi's face was still gloomy, and he did not take the threat of the main system seriously. The main system was so angry that its teeth itched. If it was not for the fact that the patrolling merchant was squatting in this plane, it would not dare to make a big move and expose itself. It would definitely have forcibly recalled the separated fragrant bodies at all costs. Why would it ask Lu Shi's personal opinion from so far away? Why? If I return to the main body, Lu Shi will be gone. For its own safety, the main system never gave too many memories to the fragrant bodies when it was sliced off. It only let them remember their respective missions, and Lu Shi was no exception. Even so, he knew that once he returned to the main body, the main consciousness would be the main system, not him. If that was the case, wouldn't Lu Shi be dead? Lu Shi wanted to reunite with his family, but he did not want to lose his entire family. He had secretly investigated the death of his two legitimate sons and Gu Min for so many years, and all the clues pointed to Wang Huiyun. He had never doubted himself. Now that the truth was out, it would be too stupid for Lu Shi to allow himself to be manipulated by the other party. I cannot absorb you, as long as you help me, the previous promise is still valid. The main system bewitched him. Lu Shi, think about it carefully. You don't want to see the son of fortune take over Lu Shi's body and leave your biological daughter alone, do you? From the perspective of the consciousness of the plane, Lu Shi's body was specially prepared for Jiangpengji. From the perspective of the parents, Lu Shi was their daughter, and he was the child that Gu Min painstakingly gave birth to after 10 months of pregnancy. Just because of the arrangements of the consciousness of the plane, she had to give up this body. Not to mention Lu Shi, even if it was any other parent, they would not be able to accept such an ending. So what if he was the son of fortune? At the end of the day, he was still an outsider who took over the nest of the magpie. The main system knew very well how to hit Lu Shi's weak spot. And that Lu Zhao, I really don't know if he is smart or stupid. I just casually tricked him, and he gave himself away. The main system laughed. In his eyes, that fake legitimate sister is more trustworthy than you, his biological father. Lu Zhao was so scared that he immediately ran away and sought refuge with Jiang Pengji when he revealed some information misunderstood that the hunter's daughter might be the body that Lu Shi's soul temporarily resided in. It was obvious that this guy was also a person who pretended to be a pig to eat a tiger. He looked like he only knew how to eat, drink, and have fun, but in fact, he was smart and knew some secrets. He and Lu Shi were at odds with each other because Gu Min had left some clues for this guy. Lu Zhao, this pig of a brain, did not think that if he really married the hunter's daughter, what benefits would Lu Shi himself get? Chapter 1179. Shut up. Lu Shi said coldly, let me think about it. We've been planning this for so long. If we give up now, all our efforts will be in vain. The main system was angry. Lu Shi was only a part of it, but now he was talking to the main body in such a tone. Who gave him the courage? Lu Shi frowned impatiently. The more the main system urged him, the more he couldn't trust it. Since Gu Min's death, Lu Shi's heart had died. If it weren't for the main system's promise to let him live, he would have died a long time ago. Now that he knew who his real enemy was, no matter what, he had to drag him into hell and consign him to eternal damnation. I'm worried. You're too cunning. Lu Shi said, tell me where you are and I'll help you. They knew their own situation very well. For advanced creatures like them who were pure spiritual bodies, once they lost their host, they were like snails that had their shells removed, revealing their weakest parts. They were basically at the mercy of others. If he knew where the main system was, he would have the upper hand. We are one. I'm cunning, and you're just as cunning. Turning around and betraying his teammates and killing his acquaintances, I'm used to doing this, and you're not going to lose out to me. If I tell you where I'm hiding, there's no guarantee that you won't turn around and sell me to the Son of Destiny. The main system refused with a smile. It knew that Lu Shi harbored hatred and malice toward it, yet it still told him everything obediently. That was really stupid. Lu Shi sneered, "You know me well. That's a very safe place." The main system said proudly, "Lu Shi, don't you dare betray me. If you dare to do that, think about your daughter first. Lu Shi's soul is very fragile. If I accidentally cut it into pieces." Lu Shi secretly clenched his fists. The veins on the back of his hands bulged, revealing a frightening green color. After a while, Lu Shi could no longer feel the existence of the main system. The main system was cautious. Even if it talked to Lu Shi, it wouldn't leave any traces. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been able to get away with it for so many years. But, a very safe place? Lu Shi closed his eyes and looked at a random place. The sky was dark, and candles were already lit in the room. The bean-sized light dispelled the darkness in the room. However, the lighting equipment was too crude. Other than the area near the candlelight, the rest of the area was still shrouded in darkness. The darkest place was under the bronze lamp. It's dark under the light? The most dangerous place is the safest. Could it be that it is here? Lu Shi couldn't help but put himself in the shoes of the system. If he were the system itself, where would he hide in order to avoid his natural enemies and the Son of Providence? Lu Shi thought about it carefully. He couldn't come to a definite conclusion, but he roughly sorted out a few suspicious targets. There was only one chance to deal with the system itself. If he couldn't hit the target in one strike, not only would he be in danger, but he would also drag the people around him into danger. This was contrary to Lu Shi's original intention. Compared to the problems Lu Shi was facing now, the previous ones were nothing. In order to retaliate against the system, Lu Shi had to have enough power, but he was only a part of the system. He was still trapped in the human body and had lost his special ability. Rashly clashing with the main body was tantamount to striking a rock with an egg, unless, Lu Shi sat in his seat, his cold, black eyes flashing with a complicated light of calculation. Killing with a borrowed knife. The system itself wasn't invincible. There were plenty of people who could deal with it. Didn't it say that the patrolling merchants were in this dimension? As long as they hadn't left, everything would be easy to handle. Of course, with Lu Shi's current identity, running to the merchants would be sending himself to die. But if he didn't do that, there seemed to be no other way. An unseen storm was brewing in Chongzhou. The battle between Jiang Pengji and Su Bei had also reached its climax. What subsystem, what main system? Jiang Pengji knew. Even if she didn't have the god-slaying sword in her hands, the system, which had been sliced up countless times, was destined to be pressed to the floor by her. She swore that she would use the system's petite body to wipe every single tile on the floor until it was clean and shiny. Her line of sight shifted from Chongzhou to the front lines. Jiang Pengji led the main force to attack Su Bei's main force. Qiguan Rang guarded the rear supply line, causing the enemy to return empty-handed several times. To reduce the pressure on the front lines and wait for the rear to stabilize, Qiguan Rang transferred Li Yun to the front lines. Cheng Yuan received orders to lead the newly promoted generals and split up their troops to take a detour to Zhe County. They fought on two fronts to exert pressure on Su Bei. The two families fought in full swing. Huang Song occasionally jumped out to assist Su Bei and restrain Jiang Pengji's troops. What made Huang Song and the others' balls hurt the most was that, as the Lord, Jiang Pengji often led the troops into battle. Every time this happened, she would always attract a lot of hatred. Unfortunately, her martial arts were strong. She killed her way in and out of the 10,000 troops as if there was no one there. At first, everyone was attracted by her combat prowess. It didn't take long for them to notice the weapon in her hands. People always liked to use the phrase, cutting through iron like mud, to describe divine weapons. In reality, this phrase was exaggerated. Many legendary, divine weapons were illusory. Only the weapon in Jiang Pengji's hands allowed them to see what it meant to cut through iron like mud. It was really cutting through mud. Not to mention one spear and one shield, even if there were more than 10 spears and shields, they couldn't block the opponent's sharp blade. With a swing of the blade, the spear and shield, the man and the horse were all sliced into two with a smooth cut. A real divine weapon. One Lu Shi is already so terrifying. With a divine weapon in her hands, she's like a tiger that has grown wings. Although one person's bravery in battle couldn't affect the outcome of the battle, who asked Jiang Pengji to be the enemy's vassal? The vassal personally entered the battlefield to fight. Every time, she could behead hundreds of people. Wouldn't the soldiers be as excited as if they were on steroids? Every time they fought passively, Su Bei's side was under a lot of pressure. If they didn't make use of the terrain to slightly turn the tables, their situation would be even more difficult. Even if Su Bei intentionally targeted her, Jiang Pengji was slippery. She could still maneuver around the 10,000 troops. Her maneuvering and positioning were incomparably coquettish. They couldn't even hit her, let alone take her head. As a general under Su Bei's command, Xie Zhe naturally couldn't always command. It was common for him to enter the battlefield and encourage the troops' morale. If he wanted to find Jiang Pengji, he had to first go through the line of defense around her, for example, Li Yun. When Xie Zhe first saw Li Yun, he felt that his facial features were familiar. There was a special kindness between his brows. If not for the fact that they were on the battlefield and the two of them weren't on the same page, Xie Zhe really wanted to praise him. What a handsome young general with a friendly temperament. Even so, he still said something. "You're really good looking. I feel like I've seen you somewhere before." Li Yun's face darkened. He picked up his silver spear and was about to poke a few holes in Xie Zhe's body. Lecher. Xie Zhe rode his horse and retreated. He instinctively raised the spear in his hand to block. He used his skillful strength to deflect Li Yun's attack. The two of them were about the same age. They both used long spears. Their spear techniques were outstanding. For a moment, they were evenly matched. However, the more they fought, the more apprehensive they became. They hadn't exchanged blows before, but they knew each other's moves the moment they met. They were able to counter each other's moves. Just as he was about to vent his anger, the troops at the back retreated. Xie Zhe could only give up. Chapter 1180. Captain Xie, do you have something on your mind? Xie Zhe seemed to have something on his mind after he came back from the battlefield. His eyebrows were almost twisted into a knot, and he was very worried. Han Yu was sensitive enough to notice this, so he asked quietly. Xie Zhe came back to his senses and subconsciously raised his vigilance. When he realized it was Han Yu who asked him, he finally let go of his guard. Military advisor Han. He didn't want to answer, but since it was Han Yu, he could confide in him. After all, he trusted Han Yu. It's nothing. It's just that the soldier with the silver spear that I met today. I always felt that he looked familiar. More importantly, the spear technique he used seemed to be the unique technique of the Xie family. The spear technique of the Xie family is not taught to outsiders except for the direct male descendants. Han Yu asked, Captain Xie, are you sure that the spear technique that he used is unique to the Xie family? Xie Zhe nodded with certainty. The Xie family was different from other aristocratic families. They were a family of martial arts, and the whole family was full of martial arts. Many of the children in the family had to play with a small wooden spear as soon as they could walk. The foundation of martial arts also started at a young age. They were good at spear techniques and used other weapons very well. When Xie Zhe started practicing martial arts, he was not even as tall as the special wooden spear in his hand. The spear technique of the Xie family had long been integrated into his bones and blood. Even if he was blind, he would be able to recognize Li Yun's moves after 2 moves. It was impossible for him to make a mistake. However, he didn't say it out loud. If Han Yu wasn't trustworthy, he wouldn't have told him. Han Yu said, "Lu Shi doesn't have many generals. Apart from her, there is only one other person who is good at using the spear, Li Yun." Li Yun? I've heard of him. Xie Zhe recalled and said, considering his age, appearance, and skills, he should be the one who intercepted me just now. Han Yu continued, Li Yun was born in Fengyi County, Wanzhou, Dongqing. He seemed to be the adopted son of a peasant family. He has nothing to do with the Xie family of Gongning. The 2 families had nothing to do with each other. Are you sure? Xie Zhe looked confused. If that's the case, why does he know the spear technique of the Xie family and look so familiar? Ever since the incident with eldest uncle Xie Qian, the Xie family had been quiet. The disciples of the Xie family would not leave Yangning County easily. With Li Yun's skills, he would not have been able to master it without diligently practicing for 17 to 18 years. In other words, if there was a disciple of the Xie clan teaching him, then it would definitely be a direct descendant disciple that stayed outside for a long period of time and rarely returned to the clan. Xie Zhe went through all the relatives in his mind, but he couldn't find anyone who fit the criteria. Sigh, if there was no war, perhaps I could go up to him and ask who his teacher is. As a descendant of the Xie clan, he had to ask about it, or else it would be hard to explain to the clan. Han Yu said, maybe there will be a chance in the future. Xie Zhe could only agree absent-mindedly. At the same time, Li Yun looked as if he had just suffered a stroke. He gulped down a large bowl of water, and only then did he manage to suppress the raging fire in his chest. What a lecher! Li Yun said angrily, how could that person be my cousin? Compared to Xie Zhe's confusion, Li Yun knew the relationship between the 2. Before he met Xie Zhe, he had a good impression of the Xie clan, but now it was like he had swallowed a fly. Was that Xie Zhe an adorable fool? On the battlefield, knives and swords had no eyes. He dared to tease him. Li Yun regretted not poking holes in his opponent's eyes. No, I think he used his actions to prove the blood relationship between the 2 of you. Jiang Pengji's eyes were bloodshot and she didn't pay attention to anything else. But she still had the audience in the streaming room. The salted fishes had already told her about what had just happened. She had to admit that if they weren't family, they wouldn't enter the same house. These 2 were really interesting. Whether it was Xie Zhe's, you look so good, I seem to have seen you somewhere before, or Li Yun's, my lord is such an imposing man, yet you dress up as a woman, I'm not as good as you, they were both naturally adorable. Could it be that this thing was passed down from their ancestors? As they spoke, the military doctor came in with a medical box. General, please take off your clothes and examine your injuries. Jiang Pengji wanted to leave. After all, the group of salted fishes in the streaming room were already salivating for Li Yun to take off his clothes. If she didn't leave, she could guarantee that the group of salted fishes would lick through the screen. As the Lord, she had the obligation to protect the integrity of her subordinates. My lord, do you need me to contact him? Li Yun didn't understand Jiang Pengji's pity for him. Instead, he called out to her. Jiang Pengji had no choice but to stop and turn to look at Li Yun. The lad threw his empty water pouch aside and lifted his hand to untie his heavy blood-stained armor, revealing his blood-stained shirt. It looked scary, but most of the blood belonged to someone else. Li Yun had only suffered some superficial wounds. His muscles and bones weren't hurt. Contact Xie Zhe? For what? Jiang Pengji was stunned. Li Yun said, to instigate his rebellion. Just like military advisor Meng Heng and Nie Sun, as he finished speaking, he looked at Jiang Pengji with a gaze full of anticipation. Whatever military advisor Meng Heng could do, he could do it too. Jiang Pengji was speechless. What happened when she wasn't paying attention? Why did Li Yun learn to be evil without a teacher? Your situations are different. You can't be mentioned in the same breath. Moreover, you and Xie Zhe aren't friends. It's true that you are cousins, but Xie Qian has been expelled from the Xie family. It's still a question whether he recognizes you. Xie Zhe is Su Bei's brother-in-law. In terms of relationship, Su Bei is naturally closer. How are you going to instigate his rebellion? Jiang Pengji laughed involuntarily. It's not that I don't believe you. It's just that your temperament is so upright. This kind of work that requires mental and physical energy isn't suitable for you. Don't let yourself be used by others before you can instigate others to rebel. Li Yun frowned. My lord isn't like Su Bei. How can you be so easily deceived? Jiang Pengji laughed involuntarily. Li Yun's main point was really confusing. The idle spectators licked Li Yun's upper body while feeling resentful that he didn't live up to their expectations. Lo Siji Lianmeng, silly boy, the streamer is mocking you for being simple-minded. Why are you so stubborn? Every time they saw the streamer teasing the little angel Li Yun's mother fans and milk powder fans were worried sick. How could Li Yun not know? However, he knew that his lord had a generous personality. Otherwise, she wouldn't joke around with her subordinates. He could clearly distinguish whether the meaning of her words was malicious mockery or a kind joke. Jiang Pengji laughed. Of course I'm not Su Bei. As they spoke, Jiang Nongqin said that she had something important to discuss with her. What is it? Jiang Pengji asked. Jiang Nongqin's expression was solemn as she said, we don't have enough sutures for the wounded soldiers. We also urgently lack medicine and pure water to treat wounds. During a war, there weren't many soldiers who died on the spot. Most of them died because they couldn't receive medical treatment after the battle. Therefore, the medical logistics was especially important. Once medical treatment was in place, the number of deaths would be greatly reduced. Jiang Pengji had already formed a relatively complete medical logistics team. The death rate had reached new lows. In a sense, the importance of medical logistics was comparable to the importance of military provisions. Nothing has been sent over from Hu County? Jiang Pengji frowned. Jiang Nongqin said, it hasn't been sent over. I'm worried that the transportation line has been disrupted again. Chapter 1181. Jiang Pengji said, the lives of the soldiers are more important. If you have no choice, use boiled water instead of pure water. In ancient times, medical technology was simple and crude. People were ignorant and backward. They did not know that water sources in the wild were not clean. They only judged whether the water was clear or not. Most of the soldiers drank water directly from the river without any other considerations. If they boiled it before drinking, how much firewood and charcoal would be wasted? Most of the soldiers used the water source near the military camp to clean their wounds. However, Jiang Pengji had set a rule early on. She would rather spend more military funds and manpower. The soldiers' drinking water had to be boiled before drinking. The water used to clean the wounds was boiled or distilled water, which was the pure water that Jiang Nongqin mentioned just now. The weapons used by the soldiers were not clean. Many of them had the smell of copper and rust. It was very easy for the wounds to be infected. It was not easy to extract pure water. In order to save money, most of the time it was used to treat dirty wounds with large areas. If the wounds were minor or the condition was very optimistic, boiled water would be used. The chances of infection and pus would be much lower than normal. No matter what kind it was, there was an additional process to make it. It required a lot of wood and charcoal. Jiang Nongqin thought for a while and nodded. I understand. The suture could not be made on the spot, but they could use thicker hair to temporarily replace it. In the past, there was a shortage of materials in the war. They dealt with it this way. The only headache was the medicine for external injuries. Perhaps the heavens heard Jiang Nongqin's distress. The medical supplies that were scheduled to arrive that day arrived on the third day. However, they were in a sorry state. It looked like they had been ambushed. Jiang Pengji had to ask. The commander in charge of transportation was in fear and trepidation. He was so anxious that his forehead was sweating. He had been promoted from an ordinary soldier to a sergeant. Later, he was promoted to a sergeant with military merits. Now, he was a commander in charge of 100 people. Although he was elevated among ordinary people, he never thought that he could talk to the Lord. He was so anxious that he was speechless. Jiang Pengji saw his embarrassment and said gently, "Don't rush. Tell me slowly." The commander said, "My lord, we were ambushed by the enemy on the way. In order to protect the goods, we had to make a detour." Fortunately, he was a local of Hu County. Before he joined the army, he was a peddler who sold groceries from south to north. He was familiar with all the routes. Of course, he was proud and afraid at the same time. He even bit his tongue when he spoke too hastily. His brown-black face was filled with anxiety. Even though they successfully arrived at the front lines, when the enemy ambushed them, they took away a truck full of items. There were 2 boxes with a total of 200 rolls of suture thread, 1 box of anesthetics for external injuries, and 2 boxes of pure water in large glass bottles. Counterfeiting was more expensive than several carts of military supplies. Jiang Pengji said, "Enemy? Whose soldiers?" They were disguised as bandits. I couldn't tell where they came from, and their weapons didn't have any insignia. The captain thought for a moment and added, "But those weapons are of excellent quality. How can ordinary bandits have them? He must be some vassal in disguise." Jiang Pengji said, "You're not bad. Where are you working now?" He was still able to calm down when he was ambushed by bandits and immediately chose to take a detour to protect Big Head. Although it was a waste of time, he also managed to preserve the items. His merits outweighed his faults, so he deserved to be rewarded. Jiang Pengji did not lack scholars at the moment, but she lacked generals. She should promote more new people to prevent a shortage of talents in the future. If he could maintain this position in the future, he might even be promoted again. Jiang Pengji planned to change the military system after her forces stabilized. The military positions had to be clearly defined. Most of the 5 countries in the world continued the military system of the previous dynasty, de Xia. Whether it was the title or the positions, it was somewhat messy, and the division of labor was not clear. No order meant chaos. If she let it go, sooner or later, there would be trouble. That was one reason. The other reason was that Jiang Pengji did not know how to reward the people in the tent. She could not send people off with property deeds or gold, silver, and jewelry every time, could she? Once or twice was fine, but if she did it too many times, it would inevitably give people the illusion that she was not very sincere. The captain said excitedly, "I'm now working under the commander's tent." "Well, you've done well. Continue to work hard in the future." "Yes." This young uncle had a silly smile on his face as he floated out. A cart of items was gone, but there were still many medical supplies left. If they used them sparingly, they could still last for a long time. Remember this. I'll get it back from Huang Bogeo in the future. Jiang Pengji said with a cold smile. There was no one in the tent. No one answered. Only the salted fish in the streaming room knew that Jiang Pengji was talking about them. As the streamer's temporary secretary, the salted fish puffed out their chests proudly. The red scarves around their necks seemed to be brighter. On the other side, the group of bandits transported the items away. It's a pity that we don't have enough people. Otherwise, we could definitely take down those 100 people. There were only 200 people in the transportation team. Even a fool would know that the items they were escorting would not be too precious. But when they opened the box, everyone was dumbfounded. A woman sewing thread? They picked up a carefully wrapped item and opened it to see that it was a roll of thin thread. It doesn't look like it, because of their limited skills. The raw materials for the suture thread were catgut, tendon thread, or silk. At first glance, it looked a little like coarse embroidery thread. Look at how neatly and tidily these things are packed. There should be some special use for them, right? If the suture thread confused them, then the distilled water in the large glass bottle made them even more speechless. Could it be a medicine for harming people? Their noses moved closer to sniff, but they did not smell any strange odor. In the end, they could only put the items back in their original places and send them all the way to Huang Song. Just as Jiang Pengji had expected, the person who robbed and harassed the transportation line on a small scale was indeed Huang Song. He had suffered losses in the past. This time, he did not dare to send a large number of troops. Instead, he used the suggestion of his advisor to break up the whole army and use guerrilla tactics. In this way, he could confuse Qiguan Rang's eyes and ears, and at the same time, he could find out more information about Hu County. If they encountered a big fish, they could try to attack. Huang Song used shameless tactics, and Qiguan Rang's side really suffered a few losses. Fortunately, the losses were not great. Otherwise, Qiguan Rang would really explode. These. According to the report of the spy we planted, they seem to be used by the military doctors in Lu Shi's casualty camp to treat the wounded. Cheng Jing had been to Wanzhou before, so he more or less knew something about it. It should be medical supplies. It's a pity, Jiang Pengji ran the army strictly. It was not easy to plant informants and spies. After a long time, they would always be found out. Even so, Huang Song received a lot of information, but most of it was about the army's grassroots. It was rarely useful. With these informants, Huang Song knew that the casualties in Jiang Pengji's camp were always very low. They did not understand the knack of it. For a period of time, they thought that it was because the female soldiers were acting as medical soldiers that the number of casualties decreased. After careful investigation, they found out the real reason. They wanted to imitate it, but they had no way to do it. They could only explore it themselves, but the results were not as obvious as Jiang Pengji's. Chapter 1182. An item used by the military doctor to treat the wounded? Is there a need for these threads? What is the purpose of the water in the bottle? The crowd did not understand medicine, but they knew the general process of a doctor's diagnosis. No one had heard of needles being used to treat a patient. Cheng Jing said, according to the secret agent's report, these are sutures used to stitch up wounds. They're probably used to speed up the healing of wounds. It's said that this water is extremely precious and pure. Unless it's a serious illness, it's not used easily. I don't know the rest. He did not understand the technique of Qi Huang and had never dabbled in medicine. He could not explain the more specific principles. However, one thing was certain. Jiang Pengji had used these things to save a large number of wounded and sick people. The death rate of the soldiers was the lowest among the feudal lords. They did not know the secret behind it, but with these things, they would be able to decipher it one day. Using this to stitch up wounds? Like a woman sewing rags? The faces of the group of generals turned green when they heard this. They were not afraid of being stabbed by knives, but when they thought of the thin needles piercing through their skin and flesh, they all began to tremble. Were they going to treat their injuries, or aggravate their injuries. They would die of pain. They had never seen or heard of such a strange medical skill. Qing Jing said, "That's what the secret agent said. We'll have to ask the military doctor about the specifics." Although this kind of medical technique sounded frightening and absurd, Jiang Pengji had used it for many years. The results were obvious to all. That being said, they still politely declined this kind of medical skill. Qing Jing consulted Huang Song. After obtaining his approval, he handed over the cart of medical supplies to the military doctor for research. Looking at the situation on the battlefield, Su Bei's side is in a disadvantageous position. Huang Song had been frowning for the past few days. He and Su Bei were interdependent. If Su Bei fell, it would not be beneficial to him. "Yumo, do you have a brilliant plan to break out of this situation?" Huang Song looked at Qing Jing expectantly. It could not be said that breaking up and obstructing Jiang Pengji's rear supply line was ineffective, but it was far from the victory he had expected. Local battles could still be useful, but when it came to the overall situation, such small skirmishes would have little impact. Qing Jing had been thinking about this problem for the past few days. Now he had some ideas. Just as he was about to speak, a voice came from outside. "Report." The messenger had arrived. Huang Song frowned and said, "Come in." "What's the news from the front line?" The messenger reported, "My lord, Zhangzhou's East Gate County has lost and fallen into the enemy's hands." Zhangzhou's East Gate County? Huang Song couldn't react for a moment. After a while, he asked in astonishment, "Isn't Dongmen County currently in Su Bei's hands?" Qing Jing said with certainty, "Dongmen County is indeed in the hands of Duke Xinzhao." This area had been bitten off by Su Bei from Yang Tao's body. If not for Yang Tao's focus being on Nansheng, he would have smashed Yang Tao's brain. Huang Song asked, "Who took over Dongmen County?" Jiang Pengji ordered Qing Yuan to lead the newly promoted generals to attack Xia County, but Xia County was not made of paper. So far, they had not achieved much. How did Qing Yuan cross Xia County's line of defense to take half of Zhangzhou? It was evident that the person who conquered Zhangzhou was not Qing Yuan. Who could it be? The messenger said, "I heard that the flag has Yang written on it, so it should be Yang Tao." Yang Tao? Huang Song raised his brows, as if he hadn't thought of this possibility. When half of Zhangzhou was lost, Yang Tao didn't have much of a reaction. This matter had already passed, so why was he settling scores now? The three feudal vassals of Dongqing were already fighting in a mess. Why did Yang Tao interfere? Huang Song hadn't thought of the possibility that Yang Tao was Jiang Pengji's reinforcements, but Qing Jing did. He told Huang Song about this conjecture, and the latter's expression became grave and solemn. After a while, he said, "This seems like Lu Shi's style. He really doesn't want to be at a disadvantage." It wasn't that Jiang Pengji couldn't fight two people at once, but there was only benefit and no harm in getting another ally to share the firepower and pressure. Qing Jing said, "I can't be sure. This still depends on Yang Tao's next move. If he takes back half of Zhangzhou, he'll be satisfied. He should be taking advantage of the chaos to seek profits and specially send troops to take back his father's legacy. If he's not satisfied, he can send troops to cooperate with Qing Yuan to attack Xia County." Needless to say, this was definitely not taking advantage of the chaos to gain benefits. It was clearly a premeditated military operation. Regardless of the possibility, Huang Song couldn't continue to play the supporting role. Almost at the same time, Su Bei also received the grievous news. With a loud bang, Su Bei slammed his palm on the table. His palm had turned red from the impact. "Yang Tao, you're such a bully," the enemy was taking advantage of the situation. To Su Bei, it was like adding hail to snow. He had been restrained by Jiang Pengji's main forces in one area and had been sulking. The few times he went out to battle, he won more than he won. This was a huge blow to his morale. Everyone was dispirited and listless. Su Bei only thought that Yang Tao was taking advantage of the chaos, but Han Yu wasn't so naive. "My lord, now is not the time to be angry," he said. "My lord should think about how to deal with Lu Shi and Yang Tao's alliance." Su Bei's heart thumped. Was it possible for the two of them to work together? The officials under the tent frowned. If Han Yu's words were true, the pressure they faced would increase. Is military advisor Han exaggerating to scare us? I've never heard of any friendship between the two of them. Half of the family business left behind by his father had been lost. Yang Tao hadn't even deployed troops from Nanxing to help. How could he come back just like that? The officials under the tent didn't want Yang Tao to get involved. Han Yu said calmly, "Since it's beneficial, why do we need to talk about friendship when it comes to forming an alliance? My lord, why don't we send an envoy to probe and persuade them?" Cheng Sun thought about it and chose a roundabout strategy. Yang Tao and Lu Shi don't have a deep friendship. If they really form an alliance, it must be because of some benefits. If we can find out the reason, we can find the right solution. If Yang Tao got involved, it was hard to say whether Zhe County could be saved. Su Bei looked calm on the surface, but he was actually anxious. If Zhe County was lost, he wouldn't have the face to meet his ancestors. Han Yu didn't say a word, but he agreed with Cheng Sun's suggestion. It would be best if they could break up their alliance without sacrificing a single soldier. But, were things progressing so smoothly? Han Yu frowned deeply as he thought about the recent battle situation. Although Lu Shi was usually impatient, when it came to the battlefield, this woman's endurance was much stronger than he imagined. Han Yu had tried to lure her into an ambush several times, but Jiang Pengji knew when to stop. She refused to fall into his trap. Han Yu had a vague feeling that Jiang Pengji had been holding back until now because she was waiting for news from Yang Tao in the south. Han Yu didn't guess everything correctly, but he was 80% right. Report. The enemy is shouting information outside the pass. The faint sound of a horn drifted into everyone's ears. Chapter 1183. Yang Tao's participation in the battle had poured a basin of hot oil on the originally calm situation. Huang Song and Su Bei were solemn and worried, while Jiang Pengji heaved a sigh of relief. With Yang Tao's help, taking down Zhe County shouldn't be a problem. Jiang Pengji had long ordered Cheng Yuan to restrain the troops from Zhe County. The two sides had been in a stalemate for half a month. Yang Si smiled and said, "Even so, it's hard to say if Yang Tao changes his mind at the last minute." Jiang Pengji said, "Others might, but it's unlikely for Yang Tao." Yang Si said, "What if Su Bei voluntarily offers Zhao Xiao to appease Yang Tao's resentment in order to protect himself?" Half of Zhangzhou had been taken back. Killing Zhao Xiao would be Yang Tao's revenge for his father's murder. As long as Su Bei endured the pain and sacrificed some of his flesh to appease Yang Tao, he might be able to send Yang Tao away. Su Bei has a fatal strength. He's very shameless. Jiang Pengji sneered coldly. Zhao Xiao voluntarily surrendered to his aristocratic family. Even if he murdered Yang Jian, he didn't harm Su Bei's interests. If Su Bei pushes him out to be a scapegoat for his own interests. Not to mention other things, Su Bei's good reputation of 20 to 30 years will be ruined. After this, which aristocratic family would dare to surrender to him? Su Bei was born into an aristocratic family. His ancestors had a high reputation. These were his political capital, but at the same time, they were his burden. There was a kind of burden called puffing oneself up at one's own cost. Su Bei knew that Zhao Xiao was a hot potato, but he wouldn't let Zhao Xiao be a scapegoat. Yang Si laughed. "My lord knows Duke Xinzhao very well. The human heart is complicated, but he's a simple person. Jiang Pengji said, there should be good news from Gong Liao's side. Jiang Pengji had high hopes for Cheng Yuan, and he didn't let her down. Cheng Yuan was also mischievous. For the past half a month, he'd been following the rules. He didn't make any mistakes, but he didn't have any bright spots either. He didn't give the enemy great pressure. He even gave them the false impression that their military strength wasn't strong. He pretended to be weak and took the opportunity to weaken the enemy's vigilance. If it were any other lord, Cheng Yuan would have been dissatisfied if he hadn't made any progress for half a month. However, Jiang Pengji let him do it. In order to support Cheng Yuan's plan, Jiang Pengji also asked Qin Gong, who was born in Zhe County, to lead troops and horses to Cheng Yuan's side to support him. As expected, the governor of Zhe County became more and more arrogant. Usually, he would float on the spot when he walked. At the spur of the moment, news of Zhangzhou's defeat came from outside. The commander of Zhe County saw that the morale of his soldiers was low. He felt that they urgently needed a great victory to boost their morale. If he could achieve a great victory and capture the enemy's leader, he would definitely receive the Lord's appreciation and his status and power would increase. Cheng Yuan narrowed his eyes. It's about time. Qin Gong was a native of Zhe County. He was very familiar with the surrounding terrain and had provided Cheng Yuan with many conveniences. Once again, they sent out their troops to challenge Cheng Yuan. The two sides fought fiercely, and Cheng Yuan's side was still no match for them. After fighting for a while, they began to show signs of weakness. There was a saying that went, "Don't chase a cornered enemy," but Cheng Yuan's repeated defeats in the past few days had fueled the arrogance of the defending generals. When someone advised him not to pursue a cornered enemy, the defending general said angrily, "A cornered enemy, a cornered enemy." Every time they come and go, they say the same thing. An armchair strategist was nothing more than that. We've already probed Lu Gang's forces. They're not as terrifying as the outside world says. Their forces are small, so if we don't chase after them and kill them all, are we supposed to watch them escape? Army, follow me. But the place where Lu Gang's forces retreated is covered in tall bushes and dense forests. It's a good place to set up an ambush. We mustn't chase after them. We'd rather let one of them go by mistake than. Before he could finish speaking, the defending general had already galloped far away. It was not his fault that nobody listened to him. It was Cheng Yuan's fault for acting several times in the past, so he had long worn off the defending general's wariness. The defending general led his troops to charge and beat up the remaining soldiers. It was actually somewhat irresistible. They had won repeatedly, and their morale was high. However, he was not happy for long. Before he could retract the smile on his face, countless arrows shot out from the dense forest on both sides. The flags representing the enemy were raised, and the enemies popped their heads out one after another. Their battle cries shook the sky. An ambush? The defending general's heart palpitated. He grabbed the reins with all his might, causing the war horse under him to neigh in agitation. They were about to retreat, but Cheng Yuan had already sealed off the path they had come from, giving them a chance to catch a turtle in a jar. "Since you're here, don't leave." Cheng Yuan heaved a long sigh of relief. He had been under too much pressure recently. Even if he deliberately showed weakness to the enemy, it still affected his morale. As the planner, the pressure he bore was not small. Seeing the enemy fall into the trap, he felt that the grievances he had suffered for the past half a month had all disappeared. Arrows, rolling logs, and hot oil were all directed at the enemy. The defending general was not Yang Si, and the troops under him were not the elites that Jiang Pengji had carefully trained for several years. They had already lost their sense of propriety when they encountered an ambush. The army formation was in a mess. How could they maintain order and resist the enemy's retreat? The more chaotic they were, the more casualties they suffered. In less than an hour, the place was already a river of blood. Broken limbs and remains were everywhere. It was like the inferno of Azura. Flames rose, and a strange smell floated in the air. As time went by, the battle cries gradually became deeper. Early on, when they had fallen into the ambush, Cheng Yuan had divided his troops to attack the city gate at the border of Zhe County. Once this city was breached, Zhe County would no longer have the protection of the natural stronghold. Cheng Yuan could make use of the water resources in Zhe County to lead his troops straight in. Although there were important military towns along the way, most of the troops had been transferred by Su Bei to Hu County. As long as Cheng Yuan was not out of his mind, he would definitely not lose. Seeing that the defense line of Zhe County was about to collapse, Su Bei and the rest were also anxious. He tried to send more troops to help, but there was still a god of death blocking the way, Jiang Pengji. Su Bei simply abandoned Han Yu's strategy and directly mobilized his troops to engage Jiang Pengji in the largest and most vicious battle since the start of the war. In the end, the more anxious they were, the more disadvantageous they would be. Without the hindrance of the terrain, how could Jiang Pengji's cavalry not run wild and trample on the enemy? The cavalry of the north borderline was so strong, but in the end, they were still overthrown by Jiang Pengji. Would she be afraid of a mere Su Bei? If Huang Song had not sent more troops along the way to help Su Bei stabilize the situation, his losses would have been even greater. At the same time, the emissary sent by Su Bei also met Yang Tao. From his mouth, he extracted the reason for his alliance with Jiang Pengji. To be honest, Yang Tao originally did not want to get involved in the situation in Dongqing. He only wanted to quietly develop his strength and let the group of immortals fight amongst themselves. Who asked Su Bei to accept Zhao Xiao's allegiance? The hatred of my father's murder is absolutely irreconcilable. How can I allow my enemy to go unpunished? Yang Tao's voice was deep, and his mature face had the dignity of a superior. Emissary, there is no need to speak further. I will personally kill that despicable Zhao Xiao to comfort my father's soul in heaven. The emissary choked. Chapter 1184. Are you sure Yang Tao said that? Upon receiving the messenger's reply, Su Bei's face turned ashen. Firstly, he was furious that Zhao Xiao had made a mistake and he had to take the blame. Secondly, he was furious that no one had alerted him. Su Bei had roped in the power of the landowning households and managed an enormous network of connections. There were at least 40 to 50 surplus generals like Zhao Xiao, who he kept up appearances. Every time a landowning household defected to his side, it meant the expansion of his own power and connections. How could Su Bei possibly reject them? Zhao Xiao was also a famous scholar in Zhangzhou's East Gate Prefecture. Su Bei had always been very tolerant toward scholars. He came to seek refuge with her, which meant that her reputation was attractive to famous people. He had never expected that Zhao Xiao would have such a debt on him. If he had known about it back then, he might not have been willing to accept him. Su Bei's expression did not change much, but his heart was filled with regret. Everyone knew how to say things after the fact. Those who understood Su Bei would know that even if he had known about the grudge between Zhao Xiao and Yang Tao in advance, he would still have accepted Zhao Xiao. Why did he say that? This was because other than the incident with Yang Jian, Zhao Xiao didn't have much of a blemish on his record. If Su Bei rejected Zhao Xiao's offer of allegiance because of the enmity between Zhao Xiao and Yang Tao, wouldn't that be telling the world that he was afraid of Yang Tao? Su Bei was someone who would rather die than lose face. Reputation and face were more important than any other worldly possessions. Moreover, when Zhao Xiao had pledged his allegiance to him, Su Bei's influence had been on the rise. He might not have been afraid of Yang Tao. Faced with Su Bei's interrogation, the envoy trembled as he replied, "That is indeed the case." This time, Su Bei gave up. Under the tent, Zhao Shao trembled inwardly. Even though his heart had shrunk into a quail, he still put on a righteous expression on his face. Rather than waiting for Su Bei to find trouble with him, he might as well be honest and take a step back in order to advance. Based on Su Bei's temperament and style, he would not be able to bring himself to punish him. My lord, this matter is nothing more than a personal grudge between Xiao and Yang Tao. Every injustice has its enemy, every debt has its creditor. This matter should be settled by Xiao and him. Zhao Xiao's voice was solemn and tragic. Back then, I went to Nansheng to escape pursuit. Fortunately, my lord did not abandon me and gave me the title of general. I have been working for you for more than a year, but I have not made any contributions. I only hope that I can use my lowly body to do my best for my lord. Su Bei's complexion did not improve. Instead, it worsened. What is the meaning of this? Zhao Shao straightened his chest and said, Xiao is willing to take your head and settle this old grudge. I, Su Xinzhao, will not do such a thing even if I die. Su Bei sternly replied, if the world were to find out that I forced an official to die in order to protect myself, would you be accusing me of being unjust? Even if I can survive, I won't be able to face anyone. Su Bei decisively interrupted Zhao Xiao's words, not allowing him to refute. Zhao Xiao could only sigh and retreat. Su Bei dismissed the meeting, leaving Han Yu and Cheng Sun alone. When Zhao Xiao sought refuge with Su Bei, Han Yu was still on a business trip. He was so busy that his feet hit the back of his head. By the time he found out that Zhao Xiao was also in Su Bei's camp, it was already too late for him to stop him. Cheng Sun, on the other hand, had no room to speak. This Zhao Xiao, Su Bei's eyes flashed fiercely. Don't be fooled by Zhao Xiao's righteous words. In reality, he was tearing down Su Bei's pride and forcing him to express his stance. To Su Bei, this was a humiliation. He hated it when others forced him to do something. Han Yu sighed. Yang Jian was an outstanding man, but in the end, he died at the hands of a vile person like Zhao Xiao. Su Bei's eyes flickered. He silently suppressed the resentment in his heart. Now he was saying that Zhao Xiao was a vile person. Why didn't he remind him in time in the past? The more vicious Jiang Pengji's attacks were, the harder it was for Su Bei to defend himself. Under such circumstances, Su Bei's expectations of Han Yu grew higher. If Han Yu couldn't turn the tide, not only would Su Bei not sympathize with him, but he would also have a bad opinion of him. Cheng Sun spoke up in time to interrupt Su Bei's thoughts. Looking at the current situation, we can't take the path of persuading Yang Tao. Upon hearing this, Su Bei's mind went blank. One Jiang Pengji was hard enough to deal with. If it wasn't for Huang Song's assistance and the combined forces of the two families, Su Bei would have long been defeated. When Yang Tao brought his troops and met up with Jiang Pengji, the scales of victory would undoubtedly lean towards Jiang Pengji's side. Compared to the disadvantageous situation on the battlefield, Su Bei was more worried about Zhe County. Zhe County was his base. If his base was also destroyed, Su Bei wouldn't have the face to meet his ancestors even if he died. Perhaps it was because the more one feared something, the more likely it would happen. Just as Su Bei and the other two were having a secret discussion, a piece of bad news arrived. Reporting, Su Bei frowned. Come in, the messenger opened the tent flap and entered. With a heavy expression, he reported, reporting to my lord, Zhe County's Mingsha Pass has fallen. The garrison troops, including the garrison general, were ambushed. The enemy's army followed the Taiqing River and entered Zhe County. They successively captured 3 strategic towns, Zhe County, Zhe County. The messenger felt the terrifying pressure emanating from Su Bei. His voice became softer and softer. He lowered his head, not daring to look at Su Bei's face. Su Bei was so shocked by the news that he almost lost his balance. The scene before his eyes dimmed. Cheng Sun saw that the situation wasn't looking good and hurriedly stepped forward to support him. Zhe County was a rich and populous place. The rivers within the territory connected the north and south, and the trade routes were developed. However, it also had a fatal weakness. It lacked natural defenses. Apart from Mingsha Pass, there weren't any decent passes. Once Mingsha Pass was breached, the enemy would be able to take advantage of the Taiching River within Zhe County. Su Bei had spent a lot of manpower to build those military towns in recent years. The garrison troops of Mingsha Pass were ambushed. What's going on? Han Yu immediately grasped the crux of the problem. Mingsha Pass had sufficient military strength. How could it be easily captured by the enemy? Unless the garrison general was greedy and rash. When Han Yu thought of this possibility, his already serious facial features became even colder. He had warned the garrison general of Mingsha Pass to avoid greedy. The messenger stammered out the cause and effect of the ambush. Han Yu was so angry that the veins on his forehead bulged. Zhe County was hopeless. Calculating the distance and the enemy's combat strength, it would take at most 3 to 5 days to conquer the entire territory of Zhe County. News from the battlefield was often delayed by a few days. Zhe County might have already fallen by now. Losing the territory could still be fought back, but family, Han Yu's heart sank. Winner takes all. Su Fei was dead. The fate of his entire family was still vivid in his mind. Su Bei seemed to have thought of this possibility as well. He said with a serious face, "Can we send out the troops today?" Cheng Sun opened his mouth to speak. He turned his gaze to Han Yu, hoping that he could dissuade the emotional Su Bei. Han Yu said calmly, "The war just ended yesterday. The soldiers have lost too much of their combat strength and have yet to recover. It is not advisable to send out the troops today. My lord, please keep the matter of Zhe County a secret for a while. If everyone knows that Zhe County has fallen, they will be worried about their families and will not be interested in the war." Although it was heartless, Han Yu's approach was correct. If this bad news were to spread, the already weak morale of the army would most likely collapse. Chapter 1185. After conquering Mingsha Pass, Cheng Yuan made use of the Water Conservancy in Zhe County to quickly contact Yang Tao's main force. To be precise, he was contacting Wei Ci. After Wei Ci received the letter, he thought for a moment and wrote a reply to Cheng Yuan. The content of the letter was mostly about matters to take note of during the march, and it also contained some personal goods. Although Jiang Pengji was born into an aristocratic family in this life, she suppressed the aristocratic families even more ruthlessly than in her previous life. Regardless of whether one was a feudal lord or an emperor, one needed not only talent but also wealth to accomplish great things. How could one do it without money? 60% of the world's wealth was in the hands of the aristocratic families. If they did not take advantage of the chaos of war to attack the local tyrants and scrape off their fat, it would not be easy to make a move in the future. Once the world was at peace, the landowning households would use their resources to amass wealth again. It could be said that there would be no end of trouble in the future. However, this was not a problem for Wei Ci. He had followed Her Majesty for dozens of years in his previous life. He had seen with his own eyes that she had done countless evil deeds and dug countless traps for the gentry and commoners. He didn't dare to say that he had learned the essence of the other party, but he still knew how to imitate them. Don't be fooled by Wei Ci's good looks. When he becomes evil, he has the face of a human but the heart of a beast. The goods he smuggled in would definitely teach Cheng Yuan a lesson. Cheng Yuan and Qin Gong led the army and broke through the Mingsha Pass. Following the Taiching River, they conquered several important military towns. The hinterland of Zhe County was open to them. Before invading Zhe County, the two of them repeatedly ordered that the soldiers were not allowed to disturb the people. If anyone was found to be robbing the women, they would be punished according to military law. Those who voluntarily reported would be rewarded with merits, but those who did not report would be punished. Zhe County was the Su family's territory, and the people's hearts were with the Su family. If outsiders harmed the local people, it would definitely cause them to retaliate and resist. Jiang Pengji's training over the years was effective. Moreover, the military political commissar was violently brainwashing them day after day. Who dared to commit crimes against the will of the people? Our army won a great victory, but the soldiers were still in good order. This made Qin Gong sigh with emotion. If all the soldiers in the world could be like them, how many tragedies would there be in the world? Qin Gong's emotional words were accidentally heard by Cheng Yuan. Cheng Yuan smiled and said, "Feng Jing, you're wrong. If all the soldiers in the world are like this, the casualties will only be greater." Qin Gong was at a loss. Did Cheng Yuan say something wrong? Cheng Yuan explained, in a battle between vassals, if their forces are almost the same and their military strength is equal, it means that the war will drag on indefinitely because none of them can do anything to the other. Fighting a war not only required the soldiers to fight with their lives on the line, but also required the support of the common people in the rear. The longer it drags on, the more people will starve to death, and the more soldiers will die on the battlefield. In this way, won't there be more casualties? Qin Gong understood. He scratched the back of his head in embarrassment and smiled innocently. Cheng Yuan felt his hands itch. No wonder those military advisors liked to bully Li Yun so much. It was addictive to bullying honest people. The population density of Zhe County was much higher than that of a small place like Hejian County. The more landowning households there were, the more wealth they would have. When Cheng Yuan received Wei Si's reply, he immediately understood what to do. He didn't raise his butcher's knife against the landowning households, but he ordered a portion of his soldiers to break up and rob them under the guise of bandits. Before Cheng Yuan led his troops to attack, Zhe County was considered a haven for the landowning households in troubled times. Every household had a rich heritage. When the army invaded, most of the small landowning households planned to move away to avoid the disaster. This actually benefited these fake bandits. They didn't rob women or people, they only wanted wealth. They took away all the neatly packed family wealth that they had painstakingly packed up. Of course, they weren't too crazy. They didn't touch any of the jewelry on the women, but they couldn't let go of the accessories on the men. The small landowning households were in a hurry to move and were robbed, but the middle-ranking landowning households were unhurried. They didn't have anyone in their family who was an official, but their heritage was still passable. As soon as the new owner arrived, they surrendered to her without fear. But they didn't escape the evil hands. The bandits still looted half of their property. To prevent them from suspecting, they even raised their butcher's knife to kill those who resisted. Apart from these, the remaining landowning households and businesses were the landowning households that followed Su Pei. They were the most panicked. Especially the families of Su Pei's officials. If they fell into Jiang Pengji's hands, it was hard to guarantee that she wouldn't use them to threaten their relatives. Su Yanxiao welcomed her second great escape under such circumstances. She had just woken up that day. The courtyard was different from its usual deserted state. The servants were busy packing their luggage. Su Yanxiao's position in Su Pei's residence was very awkward. A group of cousins treated her coldly, and the female elders ignored her. She didn't care. Instead, she locked herself in the courtyard to observe mourning for her deceased mother, chanting and copying scriptures every day. A few days ago, she faintly heard a few maids talking about the situation outside. It seemed that the enemy was about to attack again. Enemy? Which feudal lord? Su Yanxiao subconsciously thought of Qin Gong. After not seeing him for a few months, she actually thought of him more than before. Now she was all alone. Her closest blood relatives were gone. Only Qin Gong was somewhat familiar to her. The maid stammered, "I think it's the one in Wanzhou." Wanzhou? That was the Lord Lu Shi that Qin Gong served now? Ripples appeared in Su Yanxiao's calm heart. Her slightly furrowed brows slowly relaxed. When she heard that the enemy had attacked, she subconsciously thought of the barbican from a few months ago. Her heart tightened, as if she had fallen into an ice cellar. However, Qin Gong's promise to her made her feel inexplicably at ease. All her hesitation and fear disappeared without a trace. Now, where was he? As usual, Su Yanxiao finished copying the scriptures. She recited the contents of the scriptures and placed the scriptures in a copper basin to burn for her deceased mother. With a creak, the courtyard gate opened. The first-grade maid assigned to her by Su Bei's legal wife hurriedly said, "Miss Xiao, quickly." Su Yanxiao lowered her eyes and asked, "What's wrong?" The maid said, "The carriage and horses are already prepared outside." "Why hasn't Miss Xiao?" Su Yanxiao raised her eyelids coldly and glanced at the unruly maid. The maid wasn't the least bit intimidated by her attitude. Instead, she grabbed her wrist. Su Yanxiao pulled her hand back. "Go and tell Auntie that I'll go over after I've packed my things." The maid said, "Miss Xiao, what do you have to prepare? Right now, escaping with your life is more important. Money and jewels are all worldly possessions." Su Yanxiao laughed coldly and took the initiative to walk to the gate. "Forget it. Let's go." She was just an orphan girl living under someone else's roof. Even if the maid was rude to her, she couldn't say anything. The maid was right. Apart from this person, what else did Su Yanxiao have in this courtyard that belonged to her? Since that was the case, what else did she have to prepare? Su Yanxiao seemed to be invisible. She didn't make a sound as she was shoved into the carriage. She kept her head lowered throughout the entire journey. The carriage drove to the pier and Su Yanxiao was once again arranged to enter the cabin of the large ship. As she watched the pier disappear from her line of sight, she sighed silently. She lowered her head and recited the rebirth scriptures, as if doing so would calm her anxious and flustered heart. After traveling for about 15 minutes, the frightened cries of the women could be heard from outside the cabin. Su Yanxiao suddenly opened her eyes. If it was winter, she might not even have a hot dish to eat. Because Su Yanxiao was still in mourning, the auntie casually bought her clothes and jewelry. They looked good on the surface, but Su Yanxiao knew very well what was inside. Even so, after those items were put into the storeroom, they were secretly taken away by the servants. It wasn't that Su Yanxiao was soft-tempered, but she was now living under someone else's roof. How could she have the dignity of a master? She had also taken the opportunity to mention the wicked slaves to First Aunt, but First Aunt did not take it to heart at all. Instead, she encouraged the wicked slaves. For example, the first-grade maidservant beside him had repeatedly overstepped her authority and was constantly pushing and shouting. Su Yanxiao said, "If I go out, I'll die. If I don't go out, I'll still die. Why should I waste my energy to take 2 more steps?" The maidservant choked on Su Yanxiao's words. After a while, she rolled her eyes at her. What an ungrateful orphan girl. She didn't even live a decent life as a servant and always acted like a master. Did she really think that she was still the honorable wife of Lady Su? As the master and servant spoke, the pirates outside had already lost their patience. They raised a wooden club and raised it, ready to strike. The womenfolk were so frightened that their eyes were filled with tears. One by one, their legs turned to jelly as they supported each other out. Some of them even crawled out in embarrassment. The first-grade maidservant saw that Su Yanxiao refused to budge and spat, "Ungrateful girl." She followed the womenfolk out anxiously. Outside, there were many pirates standing guard. They had already occupied all the boats that were escaping. Everyone was terrified. "What are you looking at? Haven't you seen a man before?" The pirates outside laughed and bared their teeth. A second ago, they were still laughing, and the next second, they were threatening with fierce faces. Their voices were as loud as thunder. "All of you, squat against the railings and put your hands on your head. If anyone dares to raise their head, I'll gouge out their eyeballs, strip off their clothes, and throw them into the river to be sacrificed to River Earl." Su Yanxiao saw that the pirates didn't have any intention of touching the womenfolk and was astonished. The pirates saw that there was a skinny maidservant in the cabin. They saw that her clothes were simple, that her black hair was bare, and that her small face was white and clean. They instantly thought that she was a low-level maidservant that served in a rich mansion. They urged, "You go out too." Su Yanxiao didn't have any desire to live right now. The heavens wouldn't care for one person again and again. Last time, Qin Gong was able to rush over to save her, but this time, he couldn't escape. Rather than being herded outside like livestock and enduring unknown humiliation, it was better to die cleanly. Su Yanxiao wasn't moved. That pirate tried to threaten her with a wooden club, but she had an expression that said, "If you want to hit me, I'll kill you." The pirates, our lives aren't easy. We're all out here to make a living. Can't we act according to the script? The pirates couldn't let her stay in the cabin. The women on these boats had special identities. If they accidentally killed someone, they wouldn't be able to explain it to their superiors. "Little girl, you're pretty tough." The pirates put away their wooden clubs and lifted up Su Yanxiao, who had a frightened expression on her face, as if he was lifting up a little chick. Lifting her up, the pirates even complained in their hearts, there were times when rich families didn't have food to eat. Such a good girl was starving. She was so skinny that she didn't even have 2 taels of meat left. The cold wind on the river blew against her face. Su Yanxiao's swollen mind calmed down. She was smart and thoughtful. Seeing that the pirates were standing guard orderly and didn't seem to have any intention of harming the womenfolk, she became suspicious. They didn't seem like pirates that robbed along the river. They seemed more like, well-trained navy. Su Yanxiao was shocked by her own guess. What happened next made her heart skip a beat. A hand that wasn't thick, but it was hot and dry, reached out from behind and covered her mouth. The other hand pulled her back. Su Yanxiao instinctively wanted to scream. In the next instant, she opened her mouth to bite the other person's finger. The man behind her sucked in a cold breath. His other hand didn't delay and easily pulled her into the blind spot around the corner of the boat. Su Yanxiao's eyes were red. Seeing that struggling was useless, she used all her strength to slam against the railing of Class A. "Lady Su, it's me." Qin Gong had just pulled his finger out of her mouth when he saw that she wanted to jump into the river. He was so scared that his scalp exploded. Hearing the familiar voice, Su Yanxiao's body suddenly froze. However, her body still leaned forward due to inertia. The expected pain didn't come. Instead, she slammed into a wall of flesh. Su Yanxiao raised her head slightly. She saw Qin Gong's body leaning forward. He raised his palm to block her forehead, using it as a cushion. Qin Gong." Su Yanxiao felt a sour and hot feeling rush up her nose and spread to her eyes. Qin Gong wasn't wearing armor at this time. Instead, he was dressed in coarse hemp clothing. Although he didn't have his usual majestic aura, he still had the air of a dissolute knight. Chapter 1187. I'm here. Don't be afraid, Lady Su. Qin Gong secretly heaved a sigh of relief. He helped Su Yanxiao up and respectfully distanced himself from her. Su Yanxiao couldn't describe how she felt. The moment she saw Qin Gong, she realized that all the negative emotions that had filled her chest had vanished. She lowered her head and asked in a confident tone, "Those pirates outside, did you bring them here?" Qin Gong vaguely responded. "Yes, I was ordered to capture Duke Xinzhao's family, but there are some matters that I can't use my real identity. For example, raiding other people's property." Su Yanxiao and Su Bei had a grudge, but she was still a daughter of the Su family. She couldn't bring herself to say such things. Fortunately, Su Yanxiao didn't ask what the matters were. She only felt that the fear that had surrounded her had all transformed into a warm sense of security. "Then, will it be all right for you to appear in front of me like this?" Although Su Yanxiao was young, her temperament had matured rapidly after the series of major changes. Ever since Yang Si had given her some pointers, she felt more guilty towards Qin Gong. Qin Gong had taken care of her on account of his former master, but she was still his burden at the end of the day. She wasn't a heartless person. She had seen all of Qin Gong's sacrifices. Hearing his words, Su Yanxiao couldn't help but worry for him. Logically speaking, I shouldn't have appeared to avoid being recognized. It wouldn't be good if I caused trouble for the Lord. Qin Gong said sincerely. But I'm really worried about you. You look so pale and I feel anxious. I'm afraid you'll do something stupid. Qin Gong had noticed Su Yanxiao long ago, but it wasn't convenient for him to show himself. He had been secretly observing her just now. Seeing her deathly still expression, he couldn't help it. He decided to cover his face and used the excuse of sending away the pirates on guard nearby. He then secretly pulled Su Yanxiao out to say a few words to comfort her. "Don't be afraid. You still have him." Su Yanxiao's cheeks reddened. A faint blush appeared on her pale face. An indescribable throbbing spread through her chest. Even she couldn't describe what she was feeling. She had never thought that Qin Gong was so good-looking. She couldn't get enough of him. Coincidentally, Qin Gong was the same. "I'm fine," Su Yanxiao said. Don't delay your business because of me." Even though Su Yanxiao knew that Qin Gong wouldn't abandon his work for personal reasons, she still couldn't help but remind him. The temperature of her burning cheeks didn't subside. Don't worry, Madam Su." Qin Gong didn't have much time, so it wasn't convenient for him to say too much to Su Yanxiao. Although there was no one around, the pirates standing guard on the other boats saw it. Young people admire AI, young girls yearn for love. The sweet atmosphere around the two could be smelled even across the two boats. "Lady Su," just as Su Yanxiao was about to sneak back to the main group, Qin Gong unexpectedly called out to her. She turned around, but he did not know what to say. After a while, Qin Gong stuttered, "In the future, I will protect you." Before she could take a step, Qin Gong's face had already turned red as he nimbly flipped down the deck of the lower deck. Su Yanxiao suddenly thought of something and blushed. Her temperature didn't go down for a long time. The pirates plundered all the money and goods on the other boats, moving box by box onto their own boats, and retreated in an orderly manner. Su Yanxiao had long since taken a tranquilizer and was no longer afraid of the pirates. On the contrary, when the pirates looked at her, they were like mice seeing a cat, wishing they could stick close to the wall. Occasionally, a few bold pirates tried to sneak a peek at her, but before they could do so, they were taught a lesson by the wily old fox beside them. Seeing this, Su Yanxiao burst into laughter, revealing a smile that she hadn't seen in a long time. The pirates didn't rob people or women. They only took away all the valuables, not leaving behind any food or water bags. Helpless, the people who had escaped from the disaster could only paddle the oars back with bitter expressions. Without food and water, they couldn't escape far. Unexpectedly, before their boats could reach the shore, rows of armored soldiers with a murderous aura surrounded the entire pier. Everyone was in a dilemma. Madame Su Bei's expression was so gloomy that it could drip water. These large boats not only carried Su Bei's wives, concubines, and children, but also the families of many important officials. If they reached the shore now, it would be the same as walking into a trap. If they didn't, she was afraid that the enemy would go crazy and shoot the boats down. A bunch of pampered noble ladies, which one of them knew how to swim? They were all landlubbers. Qin Gong had already changed into his military uniform and gathered the majority of his troops to set up at the pier, waiting for their prey. He cupped his hands towards the deck of the boats, trying to move them with emotion and reason, hoping that the people on the boats would voluntarily disembark. We are all civilized people, so we will try our best to solve problems in a civilized way. The few boats were filled with women, children, and old. Faced with Qin Gong's coaxing and threats, they didn't know how to respond. A young, beautiful woman said, "Everyone is exhausted, and the wind is cold on the river. It's not advisable to stay for long. If we stay for too long, we might get sick. It's better to reach the shore as soon as possible. I don't think Lu Shi would dare to risk universal condemnation and slaughter us." In this era, there were still moral principles. On the battlefield, there were some unspoken rules. Dukes could fight however they wanted, but they couldn't shamelessly attack their families. If a man lost in battle, that was his business. The women in the backyard could not be implicated. If Su Fei's wife and concubines hadn't encountered the bandits, they wouldn't have ended up like this. No matter how much Su Bei hated Su Fei, he still had to take care of his cousin's widows for the rest of their lives. He couldn't let them be humiliated. Madame Su Bei was hesitant. She really didn't want to disembark. At least there was a moment of peace on the boat. If she went ashore, wouldn't she become a captive and her life would be in the hands of others? I'm afraid this isn't appropriate. Let's wait and see. Madame Su Bei declined tactfully. The beautiful woman didn't show any displeasure and returned to her circle. This woman was Han Yu's wife. She came from an aristocratic family. Her calm demeanor was more like a matriarch than Madame Su Bei. The two parties confronted each other for a long time. In the end, it was the people on the boats who gave in first. They didn't have water or food, so they couldn't hold on for long. Qin Gong sneered and sent people to send all the families back to their own residences. At the end, he mentioned one more thing. Finally, he said, there have been frequent battles recently. The bandits are running amok and disturbing the neighbors. Madams, if there is nothing important, don't leave your residences to avoid the bandits. I will do my best to apprehend the bandits as soon as possible and ensure the safety of all the madams. Qin Gong spoke in a manner that was neither servile nor overbearing, but no one bought it. Many people were scared out of their wits. When their feet stepped on solid mud, they couldn't get used to it for a while and almost fell to the ground. Qin Gong sent people to escort them. When his gaze fell on Su Yanshao, his eyes were filled with warmth. Cheng Yuan teased, "She's young, she's really envious of others." Qin Gong laughed foolishly. "It's still too early to talk about this. We'll talk about other things when she reaches marriageable age." Cheng Yuan sighed. The whole world reeked of love. Only his lord and a certain bronze frog still carried the fragrance of a single dog. Cruel. In the distance, Wei Ci sneezed. Jiang Pengji rubbed her nose. Jiang Pengji mumbled, "Huang Bogeo still misses me." Chapter 1188. These hateful thieves, Su Pei's relatives, were escorted back to the mansion by Qin Gong's soldiers. Upon entering, they saw a cold and empty courtyard. Because they had to escape, they could only choose the small and valuable items. The larger items were left in the old mansion for the servants to guard, and they could move them in the future. They did not expect to fail in their escape. When they returned home, they found that the house had been raided, and many of the servants were injured. The concubines wanted to cry but had no tears to find that the larger items they had not taken away had all been taken away by the thieves. A particular concubine's favorite shelf of many treasures had also disappeared, along with all the decorations on it. When they asked the servants who stayed behind, they said that not long after they left, a group of masked bandits had barged in to loot. Fortunately, these bandits did not have much foresight and only took gold and silver. The more valuable items, such as antiques, were left untouched. Compared to the latter, the gold and silver stolen could only be considered the tip of the iceberg. Madame Su Pei's face was filled with anger, but at the same time, she was glad that the bandits were short-sighted and did not know what was good. It has been a day of fright. Everyone return to your own courtyards to rest. We will discuss the rest tomorrow. Madame Su Pei casually dismissed the weeping concubine. She was impatient, but at the same time, she felt a faint sense of satisfaction. These concubines were beautiful but had no background. Their private storehouses were full of gold and silver, cloth, clothes, and rouge. At the same time, they were the most heavily raided area by the bandits. They had lost the most, but what was the point of crying in front of her? She would not be so kind as to compensate them. Su Yanxiao watched the show coldly, her face unperturbed. When First Madam gave the order to let them go, she followed the other women and bowed, returning to their own courtyards. Go check the private storehouses and see what was missing. Su Yanxiao casually found an excuse to send away the first-grade servant girl who was serving them. She wanted to be alone. The servant muttered, "The bandits are so greedy. How could they leave anything for us? Even if we search, it will be a waste. They will definitely be robbed clean." Her feet seemed to be stuck in the ground, unwilling to move. Su Yanxiao suppressed her anger. "If I tell you to go, then go. Why are you looking for excuses?" This maidservant relied on the fact that she was First Madam's servant and never took Su Yanxiao's words to heart. Even when she ordered her to do something, she would complain. The maid shrunk her neck, looking very timid. As soon as she turned around, a contemptuous expression appeared on her face, and the tip of her nose snorted. "She's just an orphan girl with no parents. She doesn't even have as much money as a servant girl. Why would she want to check the private treasury?" The maidservant grumbled, but she had no choice but to open the private storeroom. Although Madame Su Pei had never cared about Su Yanxiao, in order to prevent others from criticizing her, she had prepared many good things for Su Yanxiao. However, although the items were good, they were all valuable items that were rarely used and had markings on them. They were large and impractical, so they could only be placed in the private storage to collect dust. The few items that could be exchanged for silver were mostly stolen by the servants to be exchanged for money. Su Yanxiao's life in the Su residence was extremely unsatisfactory. The maidservant looked at the items in the private storehouse and exclaimed in surprise. Everyone's private stash had been ransacked by the robbers, except for Su Yanxiao's private stash, which was neat and tidy. There wasn't even a footprint on the ground. Su Yanxiao knew about this and muttered, "It's probably because the residence was too inconspicuous and the bandits didn't have time to search it. Go get some Buddhist scriptures and prepare a brush and ink. I want to recite the scriptures and copy them for my mother. Don't spread the news about the private stash, lest it attract unnecessary gossip." Everyone in the residence had been robbed. Only her own place was safe and sound. It was inevitable that people would be jealous. Unexpectedly, the maidservant turned around and reported this matter and Su Yanxiao's words to First Madam. First Madam laughed coldly and said with disdain, "Ungrateful wretch. What was there to hide about this matter? Could it be that the elders would covet her money?" The next day, the Su residence welcomed a special guest. Qin Gong had a tender face, but his tall and sturdy figure matched with his armor. No one dared to treat him like a child. First Madam and Duke Xian Zhao have been separated for a long time. Why don't you write a letter home to inform him that you are safe? Otherwise, Duke Xian Zhao will worry about the safety of his family at the front lines. First Madam's expression darkened. She glared daggers at Qin Gong. From her point of view, this was not writing a letter home to reassure Su Bei. It was clearly using his family to threaten him and force him to submit. She would not fall for this trick. First Madam said harshly and straightforwardly, I never thought that the noble Duke of Lanting would resort to such despicable methods. Is this the behavior of a man? Using his family to threaten others? She was a man, was she still a hero? Qin Gong laughed. Madam has misunderstood my master. I have no ill intentions. No ill intentions? Even a ghost would not believe it. First Madam refused to write a letter home. Who knew what tricks the enemy would play with this letter? Seeing that she was unwilling, Qin Gong did not force her. Although he did not show it on his face, he was secretly lamenting that this person was not as far-sighted as First Madam. The First Madam that Qin Gong mentioned was not Su Bei's wife, but Su Yanxiao's birth mother, Su Fei's wife. If she were to encounter such a situation, she would definitely write a letter home. In the letter, she would explain the situation at home in detail and comfort her husband who was fighting a war. With a letter home, it would prove that his family was safe and sound. If her husband was at the end of his rope, he would more or less care about his family and would not risk his life. If there were no letters from home, the husband might lose his temper and fight to the death with the enemy, losing his life in the end. Qin Gong could not be bothered to remind her, lest her good intentions be taken for granted. He changed the topic to Su Yanxiao and pretended not to know. I heard that the daughter of the former master, Duke Lingwan, is staying at your residence? First Madam nodded. Qin Gong said, yesterday, I heard from the soldiers that a group of 1,000 bandits took advantage of our army's invasion of Zhe County to rob and commit crimes everywhere. Even Duke Xinzhao's residence was attacked. Today, I have specially sent some to Chu. I hope Madam will not mind. Lady Wang immediately sensed something fishy in his words, and she felt upset. Qin Gong first mentioned Su Yanxiao and said that he was worried that the residents would not have enough to chew. What did he mean by that? Although the residence had been raided by bandits, it was not so poor that it could not even feed itself. Was Qin Gong worried that she would starve an orphan girl? First Madam was unhappy and her expression became colder. Qin Gong acted as if he did not see it and requested to see Su Yanxiao. First Madam became even angrier. Did he want to see with his own eyes if she had mistreated the orphan girl? Qin Gong was Su Fei's former subordinate and Su Yanxiao was still young. Others would not say anything if he cared about his former master's orphan girl. Su Yanxiao blushed when she saw Qin Gong. Why are you here? This general will be leaving for the south in a few days. While the morale is still high, I will take down the remaining territory of Zhe County in one fell swoop. Qin Gong sat upright and said in a serious tone, I will be gone for almost half a month. This general is afraid that Lady Su will be worried, so I came to report. Who's worried? Su Yanxiao was embarrassed. Realizing that she had spoken harshly, she said with her ears red, remember to come back. Chapter 1189. Qin Gong went to the battlefield with a peace of mind. He triumphantly conquered Zhe County and successfully joined forces with Yang Tao. At the same time, the situation at the front line had also entered a white-hot stage. Ever since Yang Tao's news came, Jiang Pengji changed her strategy against the enemy. The battles on the battlefield became fiercer and fiercer. She used the war to deplete Su Bei and Huang Song's troops. The former exhausted the most. He could barely withstand such a high frequency of battle. His kidney ached and he felt like his body was being hollowed out. Su Bei followed Han Yu's advice and concealed the news of Mingsha Pass's fall. But this was not a long-term solution. Paper could not contain fire. When the news of Zhe County's fall came, Su Bei's face turned ashen. The officials under his tent were even more anxious and uneasy. The soldiers were not in the mood to fight. The officials were worried about the safety of their families. The whole camp was shrouded in a gloomy cloud. Su Bei was drowning his sorrows in alcohol, trying to numb himself. Han Yu and Cheng Sun saw this and were anxious. When the tent was opened, the stench of alcohol wafted out and made him faint. Cheng Sun tried his best to persuade Su Bei, but Su Bei did not want to listen to him. He did not need false comfort. He needed a good strategy to break the enemy's situation. After several efforts, they returned in failure. Cheng Sun's brows were almost knotted. When he met Han Yu, both of them sighed. As the Lord, Su Bei had no confidence in himself. He was drunk all day. It was useless for them to be anxious. Their disadvantage on the battlefield was too obvious. Han Yu wanted to suggest that Su Bei retreat to Shanwu City and stabilize the situation before making further plans. But Su Bei was not willing to do so. He even scolded Han Yu, which made Han Yu feel haggard. It was not scary to have a pig-like lord. What was scary was that the pig had its own opinions. That would be a nightmare. The enemy had used several battles to make them lose their bearings. Now they were fighting on the enemy's home ground. How stupid could they be? Cheng Yuan and Qin Gong broke through Mingsha Pass and conquered Zhe County. As the Lord, Jiang Pengji's performance was not bad either. Half of Hu County was already in her hands, forcing them to retreat. Now, they could only use the terrain of Shanwu City to restrain Jiang Pengji's main force and avoid the brunt. But Su Bei flatly refused. Han Yu was helpless and could not sleep well for the past few days. Cheng Sun's opinion was similar to Han Yu's. However, Su Bei didn't even listen to Han Yu, so why would he listen to Cheng Sun? The enemy's morale is high, and now they have our families in their hands. Cheng Sun did not hesitate to speculate on Jiang Pengji with the most malicious of thoughts. After all, her actions were rebellious in the eyes of the gentry. In the past, she plundered for money, but in the future, she might go crazy and dig up graves. In comparison, it was perfectly normal to threaten them with hostages. Our Lord has been troubled by this matter for the past few days. The soldiers in the camp are not in the mood to fight. Everyone is in a state of panic. If this goes on, Han Yu didn't dare to finish his sentence. If Su Bei heard about it, there would be more complications. Cheng Sun understood. Even though he was unwilling to admit defeat, Jiang Pengji's chances of winning were much higher than Su Bei's. If he hadn't abandoned Han Yu's strategy and sent his troops to confront Jiang Pengji head-on in a fit of rage, he wouldn't have lost more than half of his elite troops. One wrong step, and every step would be wrong. Jiang Pengji's side would not be able to win if they were to fight a protracted war and compete with the logistics and supply lines. She mobilized too many troops and horses. The logistical expenses were astronomical every day. No matter how rich she was, she couldn't afford to lose this family. When the logistical problems were severe enough to shake the foundation, she would definitely withdraw her troops. That would be the best time for Su Bei to stage a comeback and reclaim his lost territory. However, it was obvious that Su Bei didn't have the patience. He couldn't accept himself cowering like a tortoise and avoiding the battle. Han Yu had calculated everything, but he had neglected to consider Su Bei's self-esteem. Let the Lord calm down for 2 more days. He'll come to his senses. Han Yu could only hope that Su Bei would come to his senses. Otherwise, the next battle might be their last. Compared to Su Bei's camp, which was gloomy, Jiang Pengji's camp was in high spirits. She had so much energy that she had nowhere to vent it. It was the same for Jiang Pengji. The weather outside was hot, and the anger in her heart burned even hotter. After all, she was already of age. She was full of energy, but she didn't have the life of an adult. It was inevitable that she would encounter a predicament where she had nowhere to vent her anger. The generals under her tent were unlucky. Jiang Pengji ruthlessly pinned them to the ground in front of countless soldiers. Their bodies rubbed against every inch of the ground. Li Yun and the others didn't understand at first. It was only when the military doctor said that their lord was full of energy that they understood instantly. After all, she was of age. Bah, the lord was full of energy. Instead of finding trouble with Wuxia, why did she turn around and beat them up? Did generals have no human rights? They were human beings, not punching bags. If Mr. Wei still didn't come, they really couldn't hold on any longer. After much waiting, Wuxia finally arrived with his allies, Yang Tao, Cheng Yuan, and the others. Su Bei knew that the enemy's reinforcements were about to arrive. No matter how unwilling he was, he had no choice but to listen to Han Yu's suggestion and retreat to the Barbican. Huang Song saw that the situation wasn't looking good and secretly made preparations to escape. Yang Tao's army set up camp 10 miles away. Wuxia returned to see Jiang Pengji first. The weather was scorching hot. Wuxia wore a green summer gown. It was exceptionally pleasing to the eye. The heat in his body gradually subsided. The human-shaped extinguisher was indeed worthy of its reputation. Han Mei, what's wrong with your face? Wuxia saw that Li Yun welcomed him warmly and his heart warmed. Seeing that Li Yun's cheeks were green, he asked with concern. There was no war recently. Su Bei's side had repeatedly avoided battle. Logically speaking, Li Yun shouldn't have any new injuries. Li Yun lazily removed his armor. Otherwise, he would either collapse from exhaustion or be dehydrated from the heat after wearing something that weighed dozens of kilograms. Yesterday, I accidentally injured myself during a duel at the drill ground, Wuxia understood. This injury must have been caused by the Lord. Throughout the entire camp, apart from the commander-in-chief Fu Wang who was stationed at the rear, only the Lord had the strength to beat up Li Yun. Is the Lord in a bad mood recently? Li Yun trembled and asked, how did Zixiao know? The Lord rarely appears at the drill ground, let alone duels with others. She rarely greets people. If she's in a good mood, she definitely won't do it. After a comprehensive analysis, the Lord must have been in a bad mood, so she used a duel to vent her anger. Li Yun was unlucky enough to be targeted. Li Yun said with a bitter face, sigh, the Lord hasn't been able to sleep well recently. The military doctor diagnosed that she has excess energy. The term excess energy, spoken of by adults, is different from the term excess energy, spoken of by minors. The former has a deeper meaning. Sadly, Wuxi's body was still that of a young chick, but his soul was that of a veteran who had been on the job for many years. He understood in a second and then pretended to be dead. If the Lord has excess energy, then go kill Su Bei. Fighting a battle is the best way to vent her anger. Wuxi's brain started working. He planned to give her a push and let Su Bei follow in Su Fei's footsteps. Chapter 1190. Some people couldn't stand being nagged. They were talking about Jiang Pengji just now, but this person followed the scent and came looking for her. My lord, why are you here? Jiang Pengji glanced at Wuxia. Her calm eyes were filled with warmth. I just stretched my limbs on the military field and was about to return to the main tent for lunch when I happened to see you. Upon hearing this, Li Yun immediately found an excuse to slip away, leaving the space for Jiang Pengji and Wuxia to avoid being the third wheel. Han Mei is getting more and more cunning. Back then, Han Mei was one of the few honest people among us. Jiang Pengji laughed involuntarily. Was she that scary? Wei Ci curled his lips into a faint smile. Li Yun's reaction was beyond his expectations, which inexplicably brightened his mood. In front of others, Wei Ci always hid his emotions in the bottom of his heart, using a gentle mask to conceal his true emotions. In front of Jiang Pengji, he rarely deliberately concealed it. Well, the most important thing was that it was useless to conceal it. She could see through it. Zixiao, are you in a good mood? Wei Ci said, my lord is in a good mood too. Jiang Pengji crossed her arms and teased him with a smile, I'm in a good mood because the frog that ran away from home is back. The salted fish in the streaming room was really fickle. Some time ago, he was obsessed with the 4 cardboard human brains, but now he crossed species and treated the frog as his son. Jiang Pengji didn't immediately notice Wei Ci's return, but the camera in the streaming room had a wider field of vision than hers. When Wei Ci appeared in the streaming room's camera range, the entire streaming room suddenly exploded like boiling water poured on hot oil. Sheniyo, croak, the beauty croak is back. Shushanyali, what? My croak son is finally back? Fairy Miaofu Ball, son, I missed you so much. Jing Ru Ming Mo, croak son is back. It seems like he brought a little friend back. Son, you're really helpful. Looking at the screen full of croak son, Jiang Pengji suddenly found it hard to look at Wei Ci's face. The standard of the salted fish audience in giving nicknames was like the standard of her giving names, it was terrible. Since a while ago, the salted fish audience seemed to be possessed. The frequency of the frog's appearance increased until it dominated the screen. Even if Jiang Pengji did not look at the bullet screen in the streaming room, her screen was flooded with frogs every day. It was impossible for her not to know about it. She imitated the young people's memes, and the audience cheered her on, saying that she was keeping up with the trends, but Wei Ci was at a loss, his bright eyes filled with confusion. What? A frog that ran away from home? It wasn't that the Lord didn't like pets. When did she raise a frog? As intelligent as Wei Ci was, his brain also stopped for a moment. However, a smart person was a smart person. Wei Ci really did not understand the joke of traveling son in the live streaming room, but combined with the context and the fact that his lord had once teased him with the phrase boiling a frog in warm water, he quickly understood. Wei Ci coughed softly and pretended to be calm, but the blush and heat at the tips of his ears did not subside so easily. He didn't know if it was because of the weather, but he actually felt a little hot. Zixiao hasn't answered my question yet. Jiang Pengji helped him to change the topic. What if he scared them away again? The frogs that other people raised could, at most, carry a backpack when they went on a trip. The frog that she raised was complicated and hard to guess, and would often pretend to be dead. Sigh, my heart is tired. Wei Ci said, in this world, there is nothing more delightful than seeing my lord. What he said was true, but it was not the main reason why he was happy. What really made him happy was Li Yun's reaction. His actions indirectly admitted his relationship with the Lord, and he had no intention of objecting. In his previous life, this was something that he dared not even think about. Jiang Pengji said, say it twice more in private. Be creative. I like to hear it. In terms of straightforwardness and enthusiasm, Wei Ci would not be a match for Jiang Pengji even if he practiced for 10 lifetimes. Wei Ci was speechless. Neither of them were emotional people. The relaxed atmosphere also came to an abrupt end because of Yang Tao. Yang Tao was her ally. He had sent troops from thousands of miles away to cooperate with her. Jiang Pengji could not neglect him. Meeting Yang Tao again after so many years, she immediately searched through her memories. The slightly childish and naive youth in her mind gradually overlapped with the steady and mature youth in front of her. She recognized Yang Tao's identity immediately, but the idle audience in the live streaming room was not so sharp. To them, Yang Tao was just a sunny youth who appeared several times at the Huangshui meeting. Even if he was good-looking, he could not stand the exposure in the live streaming room. The idle audience had only heard of Yang Tao, but had never seen him. Moreover, the audience was too mobile, so they could not remember him at all. However, a big shot was a big shot after all. There was still an exception among the 850,000 viewers. Tudu Feiqiu, is this Yang Jian's silly and sweet son, Yang Tao? Gui Kai Guo Fengxiu, smiley face angle, it seems so. I have been drooling over his good gay friend Yan Lin for many years. He was my first love. Lo Ciji Lianmeng, time flies. In the blink of an eye, the silly and sweet boy has also matured. The audience's impression of Yang Tao was very shallow. If Jiang Pengji had not formed an alliance with him, causing his name to appear more frequently, the audience would not have remembered such a person. The new audience did not remember, but the old audience began to reminisce about the past with Yang Tao's appearance. When Yang Tao was still a silly and sweet boy, many of the audience were still single. Many years had passed. The silly and sweet boy had become a steady and mature lord, but the single dogs were still single. Sigh. Jiang Pengji said, "We haven't seen each other for many years. Zhengzi, how have you been?" Yang Tao replied, "Lanting's elegance has not diminished from the past." Even though he knew that Jiang Pengji was a woman, when he saw her, Yang Tao still found it difficult to equate her with his gender. Or rather, the appearance of Lu Shi's current body was too non-invasive and too confusing. After the basic greetings were done, Jiang Pengji went straight to the point and talked about Su Bei. If she did not crush this child to death, she might not make it to next year's Qingming festival. Speaking of serious matters, Yang Tao quickly got into the zone. The atmosphere around him became serious and serious. Of course, these 4 words were not relevant to the idle audience. Apart from a few provocative comments, the majority of the bullet screen was idle chatter and ridicule. Qfengpai, speaking of which, it's strange. Our streamer is not ugly. Why is it that after so many years, only one peach blossom has bloomed? According to the usual pattern, shouldn't she use her personal charm to conquer the various lords? Fortunately, this was a cross-dimensional ancient live stream. It was full of gimmicks. If it was changed into a television drama or a novel, it would most likely be a flop. Jiang Pengji had billions of die-hard fans in their dimension. The number of peach blossoms she had could fill up the Atlantic Ocean. Tudu Feiqiu, isn't this question hard to understand? Would you want to pull your beliefs down from the altar? Not to mention pulling down the altar, even the thought of doing so is blasphemy. The idle audience, if that was the case, Wei Ci was really a brave warrior. Wei Ci, he wasn't. He didn't. He was wrongly accused. Shansheng had already been thoroughly studied by everyone. Su Fei was trapped in Shansheng. In the end, the city was breached and he died. Now that it was Su Bei who was trapped, her enemies were Jiang Pengji and Yang Tao. Naturally, it was even more difficult to defend. It was a foregone conclusion that they would meet their end. I wonder how Su Bei is feeling now. Jiang Pengji gazed at Shansheng from afar. The cold wind passed through her hair, leaving not a trace. She crossed her arms in front of her chest and said, "He should have a deep understanding of how Ling Wengong felt a few months ago." Chapter 1191. Su Bei's mood was indeed terrible. A few months ago, he had forced Su Fei into a hopeless situation and forced him to commit suicide. Now that it was his turn, Su Bei could finally feel the despair. He was like an old beast that had been injured, lost its claws, and had its teeth pulled out. He was afraid of his future and even more afraid of death. Su Bei had been the favored son of heaven since he was born. He was the eldest grandson of the Su family and was envied by everyone. Although there were times when things didn't go his way, he was still the rightful leader of the Su family after enduring the death of the biased old man. He was supposed to be the epitome of a winner in life, but now he was reduced to the state of a stray dog. Su Bei didn't believe in fate, but now he had no choice but to believe it. He had forced his cousin Su Fei to his death, so he was forced into the Barbican by others and followed in Su Fei's footsteps? Su Bei seemed to be possessed. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that it was fate. However, he didn't become depressed because of this. Instead, he became more irritable and easily angered. Many of the servants who served him were beaten up. Looking at Su Bei's current state, Han Yu couldn't equate this madman who couldn't withstand setbacks with the gentle, modest, and ambitious youth he once was. It was as if that youth was just a figment of Han Yu's imagination. This made Han Yu extremely disappointed. Han Yu and Cheng Sun couldn't persuade Su Bei. As his brother-in-law, Xia Zhe also tried to persuade him, but to no avail. Right now, Su Bei was already stuck in a dead end. Apart from himself, no one else could help him. Han Yu sighed softly. His gentle eyebrows were tinged with worry, but he quickly adjusted and maintained his usual expression. Commandant Xia, have the troops in the city been accounted for? Su Bei had given up, but Han Yu couldn't slack off. He had to be responsible for the soldiers in the city. Xia Zhe replied, they have been accounted for. However, everyone's morale is low and they are afraid of battle. Even though we killed a few deserters as a warning to others, it didn't have much effect. The enemy generals are still challenging us all day long, clamoring to instigate the soldiers to rebel. Now, there are more and more deserters. Xia Zhe wouldn't have had such a headache if they had attacked the city. However, the enemy deliberately made fun of them. They didn't attack the city and instead held a strange-looking horn and shouted at the city gate. He didn't know what these people ate to grow up, but their voices were so loud that it was impossible for Xia Zhe not to hear them from the top of the wall. In fact, although the voices of the soldiers responsible for shouting provocations were loud, they were not loud to this extent. Jiang Pengji had created a megaphone a long time ago. The thin copper sheet was in the shape of a cone, with a circular opening at the top. Although the design was simple and crude, its ability to transmit sound was not weak. If it was used to shout in front of a battle, the effect would be even better. Wasn't it coming in handy now? The first is to attack conspiracies, the second is to attack friends, the third is to attack soldiers, and the third is to attack a city. Attacking the heart is the top priority, attacking the city is the bottom priority. Fighting the heart is the top priority, fighting the army is the bottom priority. It wasn't that Jiang Pengji hadn't thought of attacking the city, but a centipede would not fall down even if it died. Su Bei's remaining troops weren't dough balls, and they weren't something that others could knead as they pleased. If they were to forcefully attack the city, Jiang Pengji and Yang Tao would have to dig out a piece of flesh and bleed a little in order to take down the Barbican city. After thinking about it, Yang Si, the naughty guy, came up with this trick. 3 shifts a day, 24 hours a day, taking turns to shout provocations. They would beat the drums and sound the megaphone in front of the battle, instigating the enemy's morale. Su Bei had suffered successive defeats, and the morale of the army was on the verge of collapse. The soldiers didn't have their own opinions, so a few words of instigation could sway them. The effect was immediate. The number of deserters increased. Even if Xia Zhe slaughtered them in front of everyone and slightly stabilized the army's morale, the soldiers were still panicking. Xia Zhe was so busy that he didn't have time to tidy up his appearance. Stubble had already appeared on his short head, and he looked much more haggard and downtrodden than usual. Han Yu felt a headache coming on. Killing only deserters can be effective for a while, but in the long run, it will only produce the opposite effect. There was a limit to everything. Killing 1 or 2 deserters could serve as a deterrent to others, but if 100 deserters were killed, not only would the soldiers not be obedient, but they would also feel that their leader was cruel by nature, which would further strengthen their desire to escape. Xie also understood this principle. But if deserters were allowed to spread, sooner or later there would be no soldiers left to defend the Barbican city. If my lord can, Xie opened his mouth, but swallowed the rest of his words after a while. If Su Bei, as the lord, could take the initiative to stand up and boost the morale, not only would it stabilize the army's morale, but it would also motivate the soldiers to fight to the death. Unfortunately, Han Yu's eyes flickered, but he didn't say a word. What's the situation on Huang Song's side? Huang Song was their ally. Even though the relationship between the two parties wasn't that close, without Huang Song's help, Su Bei would have already been defeated. As soon as Han Yu asked, Xie looked as if he had been humiliated. He clenched his fists in grief and indignation. Him? Although Huang Song left some people behind, what can they do? Self-preservation was everyone's instinct, but as the one who had been abandoned, it was impossible for Xie not to be angry and resentful. Han Yu's furrowed brows became more and more tangled. Finally, is there any news from Zhe County? The morale of the army had hit rock bottom. One of the main reasons was the fall of Zhe County and the loss of the lives of their relatives. Han Yu was also worried about his family and his children, but he couldn't show it directly. If he didn't trust Xie, he wouldn't have dared to ask. Xie sighed and shook his head with a bitter smile. There's no news yet. I don't know if they are dead or alive. Han Yu said, I have met Lu Shi several times. Although I can't guarantee it, according to her temperament, she wouldn't lay her hands on the women, the elderly, and the young. A real powerhouse would never become a powerhouse by bullying the weak. Xie frowned and said, I hope so. His family was also in Zhe County, so it was impossible not to worry. Han Yu looked at the top of the city wall with some nostalgia in his eyes. Don't worry, she won't do that, Han Yu said with certainty. Recently, the war had reached a stalemate. There was a limit to what Han Yu could do. He had more time to reminisce about the past. In his memory, Lu Shi was a high-spirited and rebellious teenager. If she really had the ambition to rule the world, she wouldn't have dug her own grave at such a time. Xie was surprised. Why? Han Yu said, slaughtering the women and children of the enemy. If she dares to bear such a bad name, she will completely lose the qualification to rule the 9 states. Let's not talk about the distant past. Do you know how many aristocratic families there are in this small hill city? How wide was their network of connections? Even if Lu Shi mobilized many poor families, the people under her command are still related to other forces, just like Gong Luo and Cheng Yuan under her command. By doing so, she not only cut off her own path of retreat and destroyed the foundation that she had built for years, but at the same time, she also buried a fatal hidden danger for herself. Conquering the world was never a game for one person, and it wasn't a game to kill all at once. Jiang Pengji wanted to absorb Su Bei's power and territory to strengthen herself, so she couldn't offend everyone. Xie took a deep breath. He looked around and suddenly asked a very rebellious question. Military counselor, if Hill City falls and the Lord is unlucky, then you, die, surrender, or live in seclusion. Chapter 1192. Han Yu didn't answer him directly. Instead, he said, knowing the way in the morning, one can die in the evening. Xie asked, what is the way of the military counselor? Is it the Lord? Han Yu curled his lips and revealed a faint smile. Xie was uneasy and felt that he had asked a stupid question. Han Yu didn't answer but asked, do you know anything about my youth, Colonel Xie? Xie was stunned and answered straightforwardly, more or less. Han Yu's cold face softened a little, making his already outstanding facial features even more dazzling. His appearance was very outstanding. Many people who were jealous of Han Yu even spoke ill of him behind his back, saying that Su Bei valued Han Yu because Han Yu's face was too good-looking. Some despicable people even maliciously speculated about the relationship between Han Yu and Su Bei, deeply suspecting that their relationship was not as simple as it seemed on the surface. Thus, they added a bit of flirtatious elements to the story. These absurd rumors even reached the ears of Su Bei's legal wife. Because Su Bei's legal wife and Xia Zhe's wife were sisters of the same clan, Xia Zhe had vaguely heard from his wife. When Xia Zhe first met Han Yu, he was also attracted by his appearance at first glance. It seemed that the rumors were not entirely false. At least the face of the military counselor was really good-looking. No wonder so many people were jealous of him. Han Yu didn't pay attention to Xia Zhe's inner thoughts. He said calmly, "When I was young, my family was involved in an unwarranted evil. If it weren't for my master, I'm afraid that the whole family wouldn't have been able to escape unscathed. Although we were lucky to escape, our family gradually declined and we were no longer as glorious as we used to be. Everyone in the world follows the red and white, flatters the strong and belittles the weak. There are many people who despise the law because of their family background. The world is chaotic, and justice is lost. I often doubt myself, whether what I'm doing is right. Perhaps everyone has such a confused period of time." Han Yu, who was intelligent and thoughtful since he was young, was no exception. He had a lot of doubts in his heart and couldn't find a way out even after thinking about it for a few times. Finally, he asked his master, Master Yuanjing. The sage once said that if one hears the way in the morning, one can die in the evening. So, does Wenbin have his own way? Master Yuanjing said, Zixiao's Tao is to cleanse the universe and bring order to the chaotic world. Yumo's Tao is to follow the will of the heavens and support the orthodoxy. Shaoyin's Tao is to unify the world and unite the nobility. When people have their own Tao, they will know the meaning of their birth, and they will know how to walk and what to do. Han Yu asked a presumptuous question, what is Master's Tao? Students everywhere, Master Yuanjing said with a smile. Han Yu said, Master has reached perfection. Master Yuanjing shook his head and said, no, it's far from perfection. Throughout sage Confucius's life, he had 3,000 disciples, but only 72 sage plain cultivators. This is an achievement that ordinary people can't achieve in their lifetime, but does Wenbin really think that sage Confucius has reached perfection? Han Yu didn't understand. As a young man, he could only look at his teacher and wait for his answer. Master Yuanjing accepted the talents of hundreds of schools. To him, there was never any family that was expensive or cheap. He respected sage Confucius, but he was not blind. Han Yu was fortunate enough to hear his teacher dissing Confucius. Master Yuanjing smiled bitterly and said, I have 3,000 disciples, but how many living beings are there in the world? 10 million or 10 million? In the face of such a huge number, 3,000 people are like a drop in the ocean, not to mention that there are only 72 sage plain cultivators. Sage Confucius traveled around the world in his early years, and he only focused on teaching and educating people after running into a wall many times. He did a good job, but he was not the best. My Tao in this life is to have students everywhere. I will not only teach 3,000 students, but also 30,000, 300,000, or even 30 million. But I am only one person, and it seems that I am not as good as sage Confucius. He had a great ambition, but the reality was cruel. Master Yuanjing could teach elite students, but the sense of achievement was far less than educating and enlightening people. His energy alone was limited, but he could pass on his Tao. Maybe after generations, there would be more and more people who followed his Tao and enlightened people. Han Yu was in a state of shock after listening to Master Yuanjing. Master Yuanjing said, your Tao is something that you are willing to bet your whole life on, and your life is vulnerable in front of it. Under the guidance of his teacher, Han Yu felt that the thick fog that covered his eyes was gradually thinning, and the path under his feet was revealed. The thorny path extended into the distance, and he didn't know where the end of the path led. Han Yu woke up from his memories and said calmly, "The Tao of the Yu is the law." Xie was stunned for a moment, as if he didn't expect such an answer. Law? Han Yu nodded and said with certainty, "Yes, it is the law. The law is fair and just. It doesn't favor the powerful, and it doesn't favor the powerless. In front of the law, everyone is equal. It is the law does not lie to the powerful, and the rope does not bend. It is the law does not avoid the officials who punish, and the people who reward good deeds. The wicked have nowhere to hide, and all evil, injustice, and filth can't hide. Only in a world where the law prevails can the people live and work in peace and contentment. They don't have to worry about the fatuous monarch, the rebellious officials, and the oppressive officials. That is the Tao of the Yu. There is no distinction between the close and the distant, and there is no distinction between the rich and the poor." Xie didn't know what to feel after hearing Han Yu's words. Han Yu said that he pursued the law and justice, but in essence, he wanted to use the law to bring peace to the world. Would Su Bei be able to shoulder such a heavy obsession and ideal? Xie didn't have to think too much to know that Su Bei couldn't. Therefore, this scumbag was destined to let Han Yu down. If Su Bei couldn't do it, Han Yu would follow a wise ruler who could shoulder such high expectations. Xie faintly felt sad for his lord, mourning for his lack of ambition. If this was Han Yu's ambition, then wouldn't Su Bei's previous actions be stepping on landmines? Even if Su Bei didn't kneel in the mountain urn city, there would be a day when he and Han Yu would drift apart. People with different beliefs could not make plans together. Xie looked at Han Yu with a questioning gaze. "My lord's way of doing things seems to be very different from the military counselor's Tao." Su Bei had trampled on Han Yu's Tao, with his completely different attitudes towards the commoners and the gentry families. Han Yu twitched his mouth and didn't say a word. What's the point of saying all this now? The most important thing is to solve the predicament. Even if the Tao was different, Han Yu wouldn't easily give up on the lord he had chosen. When he first met Su Bei, he wasn't like that. He was a wise ruler that Han Yu was satisfied with at first glance. Xie didn't know if it was because of the depressing atmosphere, but he couldn't help but ask Han Yu. "Military counselor, do you think that Lu Shi would be the one to put Master's Tao into practice?" If Lu Shi was, Han Yu would most likely pledge allegiance to him after the city was breached. If it wasn't, according to Lu Shi's temperament, he wouldn't give the military counselor the choice to live in seclusion. Either die or pledge allegiance. There was no third option. Han Yu sighed and said, "I don't know." But in his heart, he said, "You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories."